Okay, Anita, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, can you tell us why you've applied for the library board, what you think you'll bring to the board?
Sure. Well, I've been a Webster Groves resident for about 20 years, as well as a library user for that amount of time. I believe in being active in my community, and this is one of the ways that I'd like to be active in my community. I also checked the section 182050 of the county library boards, and I'm not related to any of you within third degree by blood or marriage. So I do think that I am qualified in that aspect. If I am related to you, I don't know it. So I also would like to just be involved in something that I have great interest in, and that's reading and my community. I currently work at Washington University, and I've been there for over 20 years. And so I do a lot of things with clients, and I deal with large sums of money. So I think this would be a nice diversion that I could use some of those things for that and apply it to a volunteer job.
Great, thank you. Does anyone on council have a question for Anita? Thank you, Anita. Thank you for applying.
Thank you.
You have some nice qualifications.
Thank
Megan Haynes. Megan, same thing. Why have you applied for the library board? What will you bring to the table?
Well, I was raised by a librarian and I have a master's degree in library science, and I did a short stint working in school libraries. I no longer do that, but I really think that a strong public library is an integral part of a strong community. And I feel like volunteering on the board is something that I can do to serve both my library and my community. And I can bring some of that library knowledge, but I also have all kinds of other knowledge, customer service, interpersonal stuff, all of those things. So.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody on the council have a question? Well, Megan, thank you. Thank you to both of you for applying for the board, and we have some tough decisions to make because we have such good folks. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Is there anything on the regular agenda that we need to review at the moment? If not, we're gonna go, yes.
Just one item, the Juneteenth
Yeah.
resolution. Oh, thank you. I didn't receive any questions from council, but I'm really pleased to be able to share that resolution with you this evening. If council chooses to move forward with it, we would be following federal and even state of Missouri in terms of holiday adoption.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to go to the mayor, city council meeting issue updates. And so I'm just going to go right over here to Sarah and ask her if she has something that she would like to.
I went to the Sustainability Commission in Laura's absence this past month and had a great meeting with them. I think they're going to be kind of coming forward with some interesting new actions on their own. So I don't want to spoil any thunder there, but they aren't going to be meeting in July. They're going to focus instead on subcommittee and project meetings instead of the fuller committee meeting. But they'll meet again in August. And that's all of my report.
Great. Thank you. Emerson?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Pam?
Same, nothing.
Laura?
Just want to remind people, Saturday is the Webster Family and Friends Steeplechase Walk in North Webster, 7:38 a.m. Kickoff at Old Community Baptist, and then a great, I think it's 2.3 mile walk through the neighborhood. So hopefully we'll see you there.
David?
I just wanted to commend and thank Scott and the entire staff for a wonderful 4th of July. I unfortunately missed the parade because of a wedding, but the fireworks were awesome this year. After living here my whole life, I can't remember a better fireworks show.
Thank you.
And I have nothing.
Karen? Neil?
Well, I have many things to report, but not at this point in the meeting.
No. And Marie?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I have a couple of things. Laura and I and Todd, I guess, is not here, met with the county and the school district this week or last week to talk about the Big Bend and Elm intersection. And we made some really good progress in talking about it and understanding the real issues that are involved there. For those of you who think this is a straight intersection, it's not. It's a diagonal, which makes life really hard. Anyhow, after our big discussion, including the school district, because they're going to have 1,000 kids at Hickson this year, most of which are coming from the north side here, the county folks are going to come back, take a look at that and see what ideas they have. I'm also going to hand this off to you. These are notes that I took during an almost 5-hour municipal board meeting on June 29th. And I put together some of the discussion notes that I thought might be relevant to us. And I'm not gonna go through all of this, but I just want to point a few things out to you. We spent a lot of time talking about the ARP, or the American Rescue Plan funds. And you'll see here why they're slow. The county has been using Deloitte for some help, and they've offered us some help to swing in with that. And boy, they are recommending over and over again that we're really careful about keeping records because the penalties are really high. And then I included on the back of this, particularly useful for Eric, if you have an extra one to give to Eric. These are the definitions of the various categories of things that Deloitte has come up with. The use tax, both the Muni League and the MML they're working on campaign materials that can be used statewide for a use tax campaign in April. We've had good success in the past with doing those joint campaigns. And so this is one. But the really nice news is that the county will likely go out in April. And if the county can pass the use tax, that 1 cent sales tax, that's our primary sales tax, if that gets passed, we will really benefit from that. So keep your eyes and ears crossed with that. We talked about all the recent state gun legislation, and Maria and I talked about that today, and maybe at some point we'll have the chief tell us a little bit about how that is playing out in terms of our community. You'll notice that we almost had fire district consolidation slipped into a bill at the state legislature. And there are some notes there about watching that. And then finally, I had to put this in here because they have formed a new regional legislative committee of people from all around St. Louis to determine how St. Louis entities should be organized. So they have formed these folks from Franklin County and everywhere else to tell us how we should do the zoo and the museum district and the art museum and all of that, setting the rules for that. So
Nothing like local control.
yeah, real local control. So I thought you would enjoy that. Anyhow, I wanted to share those notes with you. Any questions, let me know. All right. So we're going to go forward with some topics here. And our first one is the city strategic communication plan, which, yes.
Peter Ruger is going to call in.
Yeah, he got to everything and then his computer just completely shut down. So he's having technical difficulties and he's going to call in. Has not.
Okay, so we'll see.
At some point.
Yes.
Some point we'll bring him back. Okay, thank you. So Jenny has created this communications plan for us that looks great, Jenny.
Thank you. And while she's setting up the presentation, I just kind of begin that the overall strategic communications plan was kind of a very first priority in coming in to work with the city. And so the full document that you received, of course, is the most detailed. This is just kind of a highlight of everything there, but there's a lot more information that's within the document. And it's just meant to be a snapshot of our current communications goals and some of the objectives and how we're going to get to those throughout the year. And a lot of the suggestions and tactics that are inside the plan will inform employee policy. For example, this plan is going to guide updates to some IT policies, a social media policy, and a development of a media relations policy for employees. So as soon as we we hit those points, we'll be coming back to the council for approval on those policies and the updates that are needed. And then as the policy changes are needed, we'll submit them and move forward. No, that's fine. And if you want to steer, I'm okay with that.
If you go to slideshow,
Yeah, no, I know that. There's just something that I have to do to make it so that the public is seeing.
Yeah, and who could share only host?
Turn it on and off again, Jen.
There.
Myself.
Okay. Okie dokie.
YouTube got the cheap seats.
Into the background. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Usually there's
The power. So the background, each received a full copy of the communications plan, which is going to be posted online for anyone else to view. And so the presentation tonight is just meant to be an overview of the things that we have within that. Okay. Oh, there we go. So the purpose of the plan, as I've said, is just through consistent and engaged communication, Webster Groves has the ability to inform participation, enhance community pride. This is all a plan that's going to incorporate media, internal communications, external communications, social media, digital, and community engagement activities. Yeah, I'm gonna clearly ask Steve for help with some of these IT plans that I've just mentioned. Okay, his responsibilities. As the Department of Public Affairs and Engagement is new, I just wanted to do kind of a quick overview of the responsibilities of this department, and you could see them listed on the screen. But the responsibilities of this area include providing communications counsel, internal communications, branding, both establishing and ensuring the consistency, external communications, media relations, crisis communications, community engagement and relations, and digital communications. And then also, of course, assisting in advocacy communications. So all of those make an appearance at some point in this plan. Scroll down. There we go. That'll do it. Okay, target audiences. The responsibilities I've mentioned include both external and internal audiences. The external audiences are, of course, residents, visitors, business leaders, different community organizations, schools that are located within Webster Groves, regional influencers, and also, of course, the media. And the internal audiences include employees, the city council, and also all of the city boards and commissions. So prioritization, I wanted to go over a little bit of the priorities with you. We have 6 priorities, and they're not presented chronologically. It's not that I'm going to do priority 1 and then as soon as that's completed, do 2. A lot of these are going to be done at the same time. They're just kind of one feeds into the next. So that it'll hopefully make a little bit more sense as we walk through it. But priority 1 is creating a brand identity. And of course, this doesn't mean changing the logo, but just ensuring that everything that we send out looks official from the city of Webster Groves, that the correct colors are used, that the correct fonts are used, that when people get something in their mail or in their email or anything like that, they can tell by looking at it that this is an official communications of Webster Groves. And so this priority is essentially, let's get our story together and our look together and understand what it is before we promote it to everyone else. So having core messages developed and standards for how everything looks will kind of feed into the rest of the plan. And that'll be done. We'll probably be using an outside graphic design agency within the public affairs budget to make sure that those items are created while we're moving on to some of the other ones. So tactic number 1, just a development of brand standards. What are our fonts? What are our colors? How can you use the logo? How big should it be in a document? That sort of thing. And then educating employees on that so that when the Parks Department or Public Works or Planning and Development sends something out, it follows the same brand guidelines that we've outdone. And then also just kind of figuring out this overall city messaging. Who is the city of Webster Groves and what are our goals and priorities and values? And how can those feed into strategic communications efforts? So that's priority 2. And that's just developing the city's overall messaging feeds into this, which is just leading those communications efforts. So once we have those basics out of the way and establish what our communications look like and how they flow to our audiences, we can build upon the key messages of what the council's goals are, what the city manager's goals are, and make sure that everything that we do kind of all fits under this umbrella of who is the city of Webster Groves. So some of the ways that that's going to come through in tactics is standardizing the communications process and procedures, making sure that there's kind of the same overview and approvals on things that go out. Website redesign. We are overdue for a website redesign, and now that this department is here to help out the city clerk's office, that's something that we can undergo this fall. So we're scheduled to undergo that in August or September. And then integrating our vision, goals, and strategies into the communications efforts, as I've mentioned. So the next priority is just providing open and timely communication. So that means reaching the community with important information and also responding to the media with the information that they are looking for. So the strategies are up there, and I'll just kind of go over the tactics. Is we're going to develop an online newsroom. We've kind of already got a page for the public affairs department on the new site. And as the website redesign goes through, that'll be a little bit more robust. Just having a one-stop shop with contact information, latest news releases, other public affairs publications that people can see. Developing an editorial calendar with other departments of the city is also going to be important. We want to make sure that we don't miss things like emergency preparedness month, but also city anniversaries. Is it the anniversary of the Parks Department? Is it the 250th birthday of Webster Groves? What are those things? How can we space them out in a calendar and make sure that every employee is aware of the same things that are going on and is able to promote them in their own areas? Annual reporting already exists, but I think that there's a way that we can create more community information with that to make it more easily digestible to residents and business owners so that they understand what they're reading. And then the last tactic is just proactive media relations, not just waiting for the media to call when something happens, but, you know, letting them know when things are happening and letting them know of, you know, a new recruit to the police department, or if we ever have goats that mow the lawn in a park. Like, these are all things that we can promote, and of course more serious things.
You mean when, not if.
When,
Right.
exactly, when, not if. So promoting those proactive media stories that kind of enhance Webster Grows to the community. Priority 4, creating opportunities for effective stakeholder participation and collaboration. And that means that we're going to work with the community to provide opportunities for two-way communications whenever possible. And so we're going to use a variety of channels and methods to ensure that everybody gets a chance to hear a voice. And so, as we saw over COVID, that a lot of the virtual ways of getting in touch have been important, and they've helped a lot of people who have not been able to come in person. So we're going to keep a lot of those, and also factor in some other things. So when working on things like a park plan in the future, we kind of make sure that we've got a good mix of print and digital, but also in-person and virtual moments for the community to share what they're looking for. So the tactics for this one is department subject matter experts, just making sure that there's one person in each department, so that when a question comes into planning and development, we know that Mara is the person who would answer that question, and she's the subject matter expert, making sure that there's one of those people for each area and that they're up to date on the latest. Community polls and micro interactions is the next tactic. So we're going to offer smaller and more manageable opportunities for public input several times a year, and make sure that we truly ask the community their opinion when it's the appropriate time, and we can actually move forward with their feedback. Tactic number 3, collaborating with community organizations. As we know, there's a great number of churches and schools and nonprofit groups throughout Webster Groves, and making sure that we collaborate them on a regular basis and hear what their needs are, I think is going to be an important part of moving forward. External advisory groups, we've got a lot of different groups within the city as well that we can work with, and then also our business developments, our commissions and boards, I think, are another good way that we can use those folks to spread the word of what they're doing, because I don't think a lot of people know, what does the sustainability committee do? What does the business development committee do? And I think that that's important. And then, of course, the last one is collaborating with the educational institutions, not just the Webster Groves School District, but College School and Eric's and Webster University, and meeting with them regularly. Priority number 5 is to ensure a well-informed city workforce. Even if you're not an official subject matter expert for your department, it's important that you know what's going on and what the city is working on. So by providing employees with regular updates, we'll be able to help empower them to be informed representatives of the city. And so some of the tactics that we've discussed with that is working to do regular employee information, doing a weekly newsletter that goes to all staff and lets them know what's going on. Working with HR and IT to develop an intranet so that within the office, everybody has easy access to their pay stubs and their health information and retirement information. Everything that they need to know at onboarding is there, no matter how many years they've worked there. They can easily find that information. providing that employee training on our messaging and our brand so that they're up to date on what they're able to do and what they're able to say and feel equipped to do that. Face-to-face meetings with employee groups. I know that we had the town halls and those were really well received by employees, and then also the council was a part of those. And I think creating more opportunities for that, I think will be good moving forward. And then lastly, of course, celebrating employee accomplishments. I think it's always good and it's a good welcoming place if you could celebrate the things that the employees are doing, and whether they've been here 1 year or 30 years, making sure that they feel acknowledged and rewarded for the work that they're doing. And we can use some of our internal communications to do that. And of course, every plan must be measured so that we can keep moving forward on that. So we'll be providing regular measurement and progress and success. We've got some key performance indicators, of course, website visits and media hits and things that are standard. But I think that there's some less standard methods that are going to be good, that'll see behavior changes, attitude changes. Well, once we do the website redesign, what are people searching for? Are they able to find what they need online without going to too many pages? I think that those are kind of the things. Our customer service calls cutting down as we provide more information on the website. So I think that those things are also going to be ways that we can measure our success throughout the program. So next steps with this, we're taking a look at our current tactics and the things that we do. We do a lot of advertising with the Webster Kirkwood Times, and that's great. And a lot of these are completely necessary. And I think just taking a look at those and how they go through to the Webster Kirkwood Times. And then also our print communications. We do a quarterly newsletter, and we also do postcards for issues and announcements. We use Notify Me through the website to send a Friday page weekly newsletter, and we have some Facebook pages for different departments throughout the city. And so some of my recommendations: streamline advertising, and that doesn't necessarily mean get rid of anything, but just make sure that that somebody takes a look at it before it hits, in case we can use those messages in many different places. There's a public announcement that we're making. We could probably also put that on social media. We could put that in a few different places just to make sure that it's being seen by the most number of eyes. As far as print mailings, limiting those, taking a look at which ones can be turned into a digital mailing, not doing away with print, because I think print is an important way to reach a lot of our community, but I think that there are some more cost-effective ways. We have signed on a new e-newsletter software with the website. And so taking a look at that and what can be done with that, and seeing if it's continuing to do the Friday page or maybe changing it to a monthly newsletter that's a combination of Friday page and inside. Those are some of the things that we're looking for. Explore Webster page. I have Explore Webster page, but with our redesign, we've got some landing pages that we can do that'll create more of a consumer look to certain sections of our website. And I think Explore Webster is one good candidate for that. And also the Parks and Rec page is another good candidate. So they are within our website, but kind of look like standalone websites. And then of course, social media, the Webster Groves Twitter, Instagram accounts, building up LinkedIn, getting on Nextdoor as a civic organization. There's a way to do that. I think all of those things are good places for Webster Groves to be. And then of course, as I mentioned before, policy is a big part of this. So we're going to be developing or updating rather a social media policy and guidelines, and possibly holding all of the Facebook accounts under our business managers that one advertising account can work to promote a lot of those posts. Not taking any power, of course, away from the police department, fire department, and Parks and Rec, who are doing a great job with their social media, but just making sure that there is an umbrella, and if we need to use that umbrella, it's there for us. So that is it. As I said, there's way more detail within the document that you have, but if you have any questions, let me know.
This is really exciting.
Oh,
Thank you.
So this is a lot of talk about us giving people information, but what to me it really means is when our residents understand fully what we're doing, we can do a better job, because then they will communicate with us more. And so thank you for that, because I think it will help us do our work much better.
I like that we have a Twitter account now too. That's awesome.
It's a personal mission.
Yeah.
It's exciting, Jenny. I had a couple questions and comments. Is it possible that we can start using remarks of visitors as a performance indicator as well? Just because we are already getting a lot directly to council that way. And as well as the letters to the editor. I guess that's more of a media coverage thing, but maybe we can have a way of seeing those as well as part of this. And then the one last thing is our community radio station. utilizing that in addition to the print and digital communications.
Absolutely, I'll have those on. That's good feedback.
Other questions or comments? Jenny, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. For me, it's almost like whew, a dream. Thank you. This is exactly what we needed to be able to pull all of this together. And I like what you've done here.
And what you've done so far has been awesome too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, before Jenny goes, Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager, just on this, and I think you heard the word policy. I just want to make sure that you're all aware that we will be developing some policy. And I asked Steve Bader to be here tonight because we're in the middle of really centralizing communications. And that's not just a public affairs role, but there is a huge internet security and IT presence involved in that this city has not gone through in terms of council adopting a policy that can then be developed out into all these areas and spheres. So Steve is a part of this as well. We'll have more for that, but those policies will be coming. But that, when you think of policy, it's not just guiding what Jenny does, but it's guiding the enterprise of the organization and how the tools are utilized. So that will be coming forward as well in August, you all.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments?
And I think the next.
The next one is yours too. Okay.
Just an update on the Prop 1 communications plan. We've been moving forward. I shouldn't say almost, literally everything that we've done, we're putting onto the website. So anything that's been sent out or created is on the Prop 1 webpage. We've been getting a lot of questions from the forum. We have a forum for people to submit questions. We are responding to all of those and putting the answers on the frequently asked questions, which are linked there. And I think that that's been the most useful part, is hearing what the community has questions about, figuring out what their questions are and getting answers for those. So moving forward in the future, we are going to be probably doing within the next few weeks a Facebook Live where people can ask questions at the moment. And we're figuring out who all will be on that Facebook Live, but I think that that's a great opportunity for them to have more of a conversation and feel like they're getting a written statement that, you know, if they have a follow-up question, they can ask right then and there. So we'll be doing that and then promoting the video as well afterwards, that people could continue to view that even if they're not able to be there that day. We've been reminding people just of the election deadlines as well. I think it's important just to let them know that the voter registration deadline is tomorrow and that there's some other things associated with that. So that's kind of where we are with the Prop 1 communications plan. We're trucking along with that. But everything that we've been doing is on the website.
Do you have any idea when we will know where the polling locations are? I've had a couple of people ask me where the polls will be.
Okay, I can look that up and make sure that we promote that online as soon as we know.
Okay.
Okay.
I've also noticed, Jenny, that on both sides of the coin that committees have been formed. I don't know if either of them have submitted their initial committee report as to how much money they've raised or anything quite yet. But my question is it in our prerogative to respond to any information that either committee releases and dispel mistruths and lies or fabrications?
I've been following both committees. You know, that I think that's something that could come up in the FAQs, that if we see something like that. So if you've noticed anything, I follow them on Facebook, both of them. There's residents of Webster Groves and neighbors of Webster Groves. I think those are the two, and I might be getting their exact names wrong, but those are the two different groups. And so I follow them both on Facebook. If there's anything that anyone sees that you think that would be a good thing to dispel, then please by all means send it our way. We'll look into doing that.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Oh, we're doing pretty well. We need an IT update on technology improvements.
I told Steve he would not have to come talk to you all, so Steve is very happy behind me. Is he smiling? Yes, he is. All right, good. So this is not the entirety of all IT technology. I want to take 2 minutes to describe what some of you have seen improvements in this room. Some of you may have noticed them. If you look behind you on each of the corners, there's now a new power box and there's a Cat 5 cable hanging there. And there's new power runs on the back wall. installed that are blending in with the painting. This is for the technology improvements for this room that are coming here after this meeting through the month of July. To better make this room a more hybrid potential for meetings, should you desire, and also to have the ability to use this room in different ways. There will be 4 large TV screens now in this room, 2 behind you on the corners. So this screen will go away and we'll have two TVs on the back for the audience. And then for your viewing, so you don't have to keep craning your neck, on carts, completely movable, and wireless HDMI transmitters will be 2 large TVs in the back so that you can have presence. And then also in this room, if we don't want to use the dais and just have a meeting out here, all this can change. The camera won't be on the tripod anymore. We'll have 3. We have 3 cameras that'll be mounted in the soffits here. So 1 on each end and then 1 in the middle proximity, probably over my head here, to use in their various places. So all of this is to make this room more conducive to a hybrid meeting environment like we're in right now. So people don't have to look at me from the back as I talk to them on Zoom, but also can see you. The cameras can pan and come into you as you're talking and addressing the group, and also those of us that are from the audience. So those are the updates. When you come back in August, this room will have those new improvements. They're all on site. We were just waiting for the right moments to put them up. So happy to answer any questions.
Who's operating cameras? How many people are there?
So
You?
the clerk's office does not have to operate cameras. They certainly can be manually controlled, but they are set for zones or they pick up on voices.
Got it. Okay.
The system now do that where the director has the microphone. I would call it a phase 2. So this is all funded and already funded, and it's in the budget, the past year's budget, and it's taken care of. But there is a phase 2 potential, and that is really, these microphones are good. We did notice obviously the little off buttons on there and such. But if this room wants to be more flexible, should we go to wireless microphones that can work around? And there are other systems and those kind of sound issues that we'll address. We'll look and see at the feasibility of that and where we are financially bring that to you. But with the 20,000 that was appropriated, this was the steps we can take to increase the technology and allow you that.
This is also very exciting. And I mean, just as Laura said earlier, I think that in the aspect of us being able to communicate and reach the constituents better, this is going to allow us to do so.
And I appreciate you putting those screens on a mobile kind of cart so that we can still preserve the historic nature of that wall back there.
And I did want to just highlight, I want to thank Mara's office. They did check all the things we're doing. COVID and such.
We wouldn't expect anything less from Mara's department.
So, Steve, did I miss anything? My huge thanks to the whole thanks to the council. Steve and Jonathan have just knocked this out of the park in a very short time since I've been here. What do we need to be done? What do we need to get ordered? Like I said, it's all downstairs, just waiting for this meeting to be done so we can start putting it.
It's very exciting.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Share real quick about the employee webcams.
Oh, yes,
Thank you.
thank you. So we did have budget town halls, which all of you were part of, and then of course we realized that most of our employees, 98% of our employees, do not have a way to interact with an online town hall. They do not have webcams. So we have ordered, and the entire organization now has webcams. Why is that important? As we're coming back, well, we're going into the Microsoft integration. Microsoft Teams, and both Dr. Peoples and I have worked in an environment like this, will replace this. It will ultimately, you will move, there'll be, I want to make a phone call, a video call will be so much easier on the phone, on the computer. So that the webcams are just absolute necessity. It was a small expenditure we were able to find in the budget, but it really will improve the engagement and the operation efficiency.
Prepares us for the next pandemic.
Yes.
Well, and it allows them to do their work with their respective constituents. Mara is great. She'll get on the phone with people and if they have Zoom capabilities, you were probably the 1% that did have a webcam. You will link in with people. She'll show them plans. This will allow greater flexibility for others to be able to do that sort of thing as well. So it's great to be able to have the communication for town halls and that sort of thing. But there's also really small pockets of just being able to connect with individual community members that have a question. And so we're really excited about it.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, Peter Ruger is still having technical difficulties. So I offered for August 3rd. If he's going to try again,
Computer up. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right, our next item is the presentation on historic city actions, and I think that's Dr. Peoples.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor. I'm actually going to get up so I can see the screen as well. It's handy when you're talking. So, and this will be brief. It just was so incredibly important in terms of the historic value and as a community, I think, to acknowledge. Many of you are on Facebook and the different social media, and so you may have seen the copy of a letter that recently circulated around the community. But a community member, I believe the gentleman we've reached out, but lives in the community, from the community. But the letter is historic in nature. I believe it was written in 1951. And the letter was written on city letterhead and discussed city actions that were discriminatory. And so I really, again, in the commentary, if you all read the Facebook threads, it was great, sounds like a silly word to use with the topic, but hearing people's interest in the history, that was good. So we dived in a little further. I asked the clerks, and they were incredibly helpful after seeing the letter on letterhead, to dive into our history and to pull some of the different minutes. And you guys are, I'm sure, very familiar with this history here. Slide 1 is information taken from our North Webster walking tour guide. Benny Gordon began the ball rolling on an inclusive pool, and I wanted to show this to you as it directly leads into the next slide. So this is the letter that was circulated on Facebook. And as you can see, it is on our historic letterhead, which is just really interesting. And so it's hard to read, of course. So what we have is the text on the next slide of it. And so for those that have not, again, seen the letter, it was dated November 13th, 1951, and was sent from a woman to her daughter, Susan. And so in the letter, the writer recapped her last park board meeting and the events of the meeting, which largely was how to handle Negroes being at the swimming pool for that swim season. And so just for people that are listening, I am going to read it. And it's Dearest Susan, it seems fitting to use this paper letter. It seems fitting to use this paper letter is written on WG City letterhead because last week I attended my last meeting with the park board, saw my successor installed, and Dee Daniels takes over the position as secretary. Ah, me. It was so sad. I never hated to leave anything so much, and this year looks like a red hot potato with plenty of worry. We met with the city council, mayor, lawyer, etc., and decided 1, pool to have trial opening in 1952, 2, no mixed swimming, 3, a 3-to-1 ratio, whites 3 days, Negro 1 day, etc., regardless of holidays and weekends, except about 5 Negroes on their day. 4, pool open to Webster residents only to keep out STL Negroes. 5, sale of season and swim tickets must reach 20,000 by March 15th. 6, if 20,000 is not guaranteed by March 15th, money will be returned and pool will not open. Now let's see all our loud talking non-segregation groups come forth and support this. Our bets are 5-to-1, the pool won't open, but we'll give it a good try. So again, I asked the clerks, you're fine, yeah, thanks, to pull some of that history for us. And this again is hard to read, but what that history shows is that the minutes reflect the same information that the letter shared, along with more egregious detail. And for example, keeping the pool open to residents only. And then in slide 5, you'll see that the petitions came out from the community to keep the pool segregated. So, which again is really interesting. If anybody's interested in having the slides or having direct copies, we're happy to share those. But the pool closure and discussion of pool segregation ended after there was an election in 1953 and residents voted to allow all residents to use the pool. They elected a new mayor, they elected a new council, and they elected a board of freeholders to draft the city charter, of which we operate under today. So again, I wanted to just thank individuals for sharing that on Facebook and just considering who we are as an organization, who we're trying to be as an organization, diversity, inclusion, equity, and acknowledging our past and the neat things that we're doing to move forward, which includes all community. And I also think, which was just kind of stars aligning, certainly wasn't intentional, but as the council has action later this evening to discuss the Juneteenth holiday, how fitting is this? So just wanted to share this with you this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you. Interesting. Any thoughts, questions from council?
One of the maybe few sometimes benefits of social media is that we might never have seen the letter, as a community, and it was really generous that a community member shared that with us. It's good to know.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward, Marie. All right, our next agenda item is appointments to boards and commissions, and we have none, correct?
Well, there's 2 vacancies. We had 2 interviews tonight and one more on August 3rd. So if you'd like to hold off.
I think we'll do that until we get the third person interviewed.
And I appreciate, I don't know, Karen, just if you have inquired of the library board, is there anything they need or want in terms of people? Since we have more candidates than we have like particular skills, right? So we've got somebody with library science degree, we've got a lawyer, we've got.
You have a lawyer on the board?
I'm not sure.
Sorry, I put you on the spot. I
When,
apologize.
when
for
is
doing
the,
that.
when is the library board meeting next?
It's usually the 3rd Wednesday.
So if you go to the next meeting, when you go to the next meeting, see if there's like a skill set that the board is lacking.
I know they
might
do
want-
have they, in fact, we received a report at the last meeting from the full-time librarian, researcher, I think is what she does, but she's just gone through, she's archived all the Webster Kirkwood Times papers. She's got all of them except like 3 editions or something like that. And so she's been doing a lot of work with that, but I'll ask if there's a particular skill set that we'd like to see.
All right. Anything else? We have 15 minutes. Would this be an appropriate time to do a very quick closed session so that you could update us?
I think this would be perfect time.
Right. Is there a way that we can have that closed session and you can take folks out and bring them back in? Just close it out and ask them to come back at 7:30? Okay, that would be fine.
So you need a motion, right?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mayor, I'd like to move for an executive closed session and under number 3 personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren 3, close paren. Any other criteria?
I believe 1 and 2 also.
And number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren 1, close paren. Number 2, real estate, Missouri statute 610.021, open paren 2, close paren.
Second.
Mayor Welch,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
And give us just 1 minute. So close out here.
Okay.
Please join us.
Yes, that's.
Yes,
7:30.
please join us at 7:30 when we come back in. Oh my gosh, Scott. The council meeting to order. And first of all, our major apologies to those of you who've been waiting for us to start this meeting. We got caught up in a few things in closed session, and so you have our apologies. And again, I remind you, if you have a remark and you submitted it by 4 p.m., it will be read into the minutes. And otherwise, if you'd like to speak during the public hearing or remarks of visitors, please raise your hand, raise that hand button on Zoom. So we'll start with a roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Welch,
Here.
Councilmember Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander. Here. Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, we're going to begin with a public hearing tonight, which is on zoning code text amendments, multiple family dwelling regulations. These are proposed amendments, including changes to the use regulations regarding multiple family dwellings and dimensional regulations in the C1 and D commercial districts in sections 53.110 through 53.143 and section 53.159 of the zoning code. Proposed amendments further include changes to attached garage regulations regarding non-single family dwelling uses in sections 53.203 and additional minimum street setbacks in section 53.205. You can explain all that to us now, Mara.
And I will apologize that there are quite a number of slides, but I thought it was quite important because with all of the various code amendments that we've been making over the last few years, a lot of them are overlapping from one to the next about what changes we're making and why we're making the changes that we are. So we wanted to make sure that we went through all of the things that the Plan Commission addressed and spent quite a bit of time discussing over 3 public hearing dates. So what I am going to do is walk through with you the various code sections, why we made the changes that we did, and then go through what the red line items are. And I will begin that momentarily. I will tell you that it was passed unanimously by the Plan Commission. And again, it went through 3 months of public hearing in regards to this particular item. You're fine.
It's here.
Can I ask just to get out of the way? Does this have anything to do with the Douglas Hill proposal at all?
This has nothing to do with Douglas Hill proposal. This is only for properties that are currently zoned C or D commercial, which the rezoning that is happening for Douglas Hill is to a commercial. And the property itself is zoned industrial, which is not under consideration.
Thank you.
Similarly, this has nothing, and you're gonna discuss this, I'm sure, so maybe you can wait to answer this, but nothing to do with what Prop 1 is about.
Correct, it's not, it has nothing to do with Prop 1 either.
ICA.
So as I said briefly, this was held over 3 months of public hearings for the Planning Commission. April, May, and June. They closed the hearing with a unanimous vote, moving forward these proposed types of amendments. So what is multiple family housing and how is it different from the other amendments that we're working on? Multiple family is very specific. Dwelling multiple is when it's designed for 3 or more families. So very specific in the definition, as well as the opportunity that it could be for apartments. So apartments or dwelling multiple. And we already had definitions in the code in regards to that, because the code already had opportunities for dwelling multiple and for apartments as uses that were allowed in the code. So again, what is multiple family housing? It can be triplexes, fourplexes, townhouses. It can be garden or courtyard apartments. It can be residences over storefronts on a 2nd or 3rd story. It can be multiple story apartment buildings, mixed use buildings, or condos. We gave a couple just images of some different types of housing just to show.
Well, we have almost all of those already in Webster, right?
We do. We have this in a number of areas, which is why we're kind of trying to tie this back into what the zoning code allows. So this map actually ties directly in with Councilmember Franklin's comment. This map is trying to highlight just the multiple family residential, which is in that dark yellow color. As well as looking at the C, the D, and the PC planned commercial. Those are the areas that are already zoned for CD or PC. Most of the already zoned PC were made up of a request of C and D. So in some cases, they might have said, you may have all uses in the D district. So if we now say that you can have all uses in the D district, we will need to just verify that if there is already an existing building. So for example, the Novus building, which is a PC planned commercial, as a list of uses, it doesn't say all of those uses in D, it has very specific uses. So if multifamily was not under those uses, this does not allow them to then change their offices into multifamily. But there are some really, really old PC districts from when the PC was first included. And some of those do have they have everything empty. So looking at those, we've tried to carefully look at those, but in most cases, they would not be able to have them anyway due to the way that the code is written. But what we wanted to do was look back to what the comprehensive plan says. Because many times when we look to rezonings, we look to what does the comprehensive plan say in regards to whether you can have mixed use, whether you can have multifamily, whether it's something that can be rezoned that might be something else currently today. So the first zoning code 1923 formally separated development by types. So in 1923, they had commercial, they had multifamily, they had single family and two family. They allowed the multifamily use types within and near commercial districts. So that is how the maps kind of focused on, trying to make them close to the areas that they could easily walk to, close to the areas that were the most dense. In 1978, the comprehensive plan recommended that multifamily and apartment uses should be within or near existing commercial areas, and in the redevelopment of any large institutional land. So if there was an institution that had closed down, so for example, the condos that are on Lockwood that used to be a school, one of the school districts, I think the middle school.
It was Plymouth, that was my school.
Oh, there you go. Across the street from Eaton Seminary. And that was the idea that you could develop on larger institutional land and you could put multi-family there. In 2006, our comprehensive, our development foundation plan strongly encouraged having mixed multifamily residential and commercial in our city's commercial districts. Focus and goals were to try to have more mixed development. And in addition, they also talked about that it would be something that would help with income generation in providing the services, increasing the tax base in areas that were already workable, and then looking at the idea of the person versus operating. So those are very critical in looking at why would we want to move forward with continuing to allow things that were already recommended through the years in the comprehensive plan. The maps that we have with the comprehensive plan, which were the only thing that was adopted from the 2006 Development Foundation Plan, did identify quite a bit of multifamily in and around our various commercial districts. And it identified them in key areas also as mixed use. So those were already, again, part of the adoption of the plan. And then in 2017, when we did a comprehensive plan map amendment to try to integrate the maps from 78 and 2006, we looked at, there were key areas that were already identified as mixed use. And we made sure that because there had been so much community discussion in 2006 with hearings, that we wanted to make sure that we kept that consistent and made sure that those maps matched each other. So you can see these areas, all that dark purple is considered mixed use. However, if you want to go to mixed use, in many cases, you have to zone to PC planned commercial. So when you think about the idea of there are by right uses, and then there are uses that are more of a planned use, where you have to ask for things. In the by right uses, we have a very strict set of regulations. So we can say, if you want to put multifamily, you have to be this height and have these setbacks and meet this parking. If you go to a PC planned commercial, it's not a free-for-all, but it's, you may ask for anything. And then you have to discuss and debate what works. It's almost like giving a whole series of variances, debating whether a certain setback works well, or whether you want to do additional height, or whether they should have additional, less parking. And so what it does is it sort of requires multiple developers or property owners to have to look towards that PC planned commercial and have further debate and discussion. Whereas if you do already have a set of regulations for the multifamily, you can put something in that is consistent with what you would want in the community. So what staff looked at was some options of what could we do and why should we do this? What are the benefits of allowing multiple family housing in the community? So one of the things is it comes back to more housing type options, empty nesters seeking to downsize. Many of them don't want to have the overall property and lots, they want to have something smaller. Households without children, again, not necessarily needing all the additional land, or just starting out in a community, starting to understand that that's the community you want to live in, and having a place to stay. And then opportunities for affordability and multiple price points. Danny in my office did a fabulous job getting a lot of this information and data pulled together to show the differences between 1970 census data and 2019. Our population has changed. Our population under the age of 18 has decreased. Our percent of population 65 and older has increased. Our households with children has actually decreased. I know many people would disagree with that with the school district, but it has actually been decreased since the 1970s. Households without children and renter households without children has increased incredibly. And renter households without children is a pretty enormous number. It's at 83.3%. In addition, the average household size has decreased since 1970. Additional benefits to allowing multiple family housing in the community, additional customers for local businesses. I think a lot of people have seen that we have local business owners who live in the community, and many people are very enamored of trying to support those types of businesses as being both a community member and as a business owner that owns, that also lives within the community. You also attract additional households when you're within a certain distance. Typical household in St. Louis spends about $3,600 per year on restaurant dining. So $23 per week. On local restaurants, we're paying an extra $1,200 per year for Webster businesses. So just throwing some numbers out there on some things to think about. Also, the attraction of a market base. They look at those numbers of disposable income within a mile or within 3 miles. So thinking about that density in the area where it is most logical to go. We always look also, planners like to look at walk scales. There's a walk score website where you can kind of see and document the opportunity for walkability, that you don't have to go to a big box store. We have a lot of those things right there within our community. Our walk scores are pretty high. When you use marker of Old Webster, Old Orchard, they really do have quite high walk scores. You can get to grocery stores, you can get to restaurants, you can get to a lot of their services. In addition, when you look at the county sales tax pool as well as what the property taxes bring in, Danny pulled this together. This is the L, and looking at the 2021 assessment of the L property. What it means for the estimated local property tax revenue coming to us and to the school district just from that one structure. So you have an estimated 2021 local property tax revenue of $10,500 coming to the city and $70,785 going to Webster School District. Additionally, it allows us to participate in the market more efficiently and effectively in keeping things all together in terms of development and larger scale development. It also helps us to weather the market when you have real estate markets with different transition points and a more diversified building stock and tax base. This is something that, again, planners, we think about this often. The Supreme Court case of Euclid versus Ambler is one that we have to study and make sure we can answer in our exams. But one of the key things that came out of that case is apartment housing was always considered, in this case, it says often the apartment house is a mere parasite, constructed in order to take advantage of the open spaces and attractive surroundings created by the residential character of the neighborhood. And so the question is, what do we want to be? And what do we want to look towards for the future? So one of the things that we did is we looked at the potential challenges and concerns, because there are challenges and concerns when putting something in as a by right use. And what does this mean for all of these things? And one of the things that's really important to note is that we use so many other code sections that have already been addressed that take care of a number of these issues. So building height is already in chapter 52. Parking is already in chapter 52, and I apologize, these should say 53. I'm all found that we've been writing the numbers too many times. So chapter 53 is in zoning code. Landscaping is in chapter 10. Lighting requirements in chapter 20. Additional performance standards for noise. Occupancies section is already in there, as well as the architecture review board for design. In addition, traffic can be impacted by adjacent regulations in regards to some of the other elements of the development. And we can also, if someone wants to go above and beyond the by right, we would have the ability to say, well, you should go ahead and rezone to the planned commercial, which gives us that opportunity to still have some other development, but we wouldn't see it as often. So to be very clear, we're very focused only on the C and D commercial district. So this map identifies these properties in pink are already zoned for C. These properties in a lighter shade of pink are D, and the C1 commercial district, it's actually just an overlay on a few key streets, which gives an additional height ability in our existing code. And then these are the PC plan commercial. So again, this is very limited to where it can be applied. It's very limited to how it can be applied. And so we're going to focus on those sections of the map. Here are some photos. I know it was mentioned earlier that we do already have multiple family in very number of areas within the community. And most of those are anywhere from 3 and 4 stories already. Some of them go up to, if you think about the garages underneath, they are in some cases 5. When you think about how these have come into play, many of them were done in earlier zoning codes and were done and then zoned after the fact to a different code section. So we found that people say to us, well, you're telling me I can't put multifamily here, but there's a building right next door that's multifamily. And I'll have to say, well, that was done before this section of the code. And so sorry, this is a logical place for you to put multifamily, but the code doesn't let you do it now. So we had a lot of conversations on different properties. So these are the key considerations that we looked at. We looked at use, adding multifamily back in or looking at it as a by right use. We looked at height. We looked at all the setbacks, side, front, side, and rear, because many of them do impact on all sides. We looked at the minimum area requirements in terms of lots. We looked at parking. We looked at front entry and side entry attached garages, because that can have a bigger impact than even just a front entry garage on a single family house. We looked at open space regulations and then other things, performance standards, tree landscape, stormwater. Blew through that. So the first thing that we did is we looked at use. So the proposed amendment is to allow multiple family dwellings as a permitted use in the C and D commercial districts with a certain set of regulations. Right now in the D district, you have to get a conditional use permit, which is just as much as you would have to do if you're going through a PC rezoning. And it's not allowed in the C district at all. So for those that know, we have a lot of apartment buildings in our C district. It's not even a conditional use. You can't even ask for this conditional use, and the only way you can get it is to rezone to a PC. And even those PC districts, if the comprehensive plan doesn't show it as mixed use, you can't ask for it at all, because we should not be recommending a rezoning against the comprehensive. So our focus was allowing it now as a permitted use with regulations in the C districts. Height was pretty important to look at. There are existing regulations in our code that allow a 2.5-story and 35-foot building in a standard C commercial district. The max height in the D district is 3 stories and 45 feet. And then there are other things in the overlay on certain streets that do allow also to exceed the 3 stories and 45 feet if you meet certain regulations of intensity and footprint. And those include streets on Highway 66, which is Watson, Lockwood Avenue, Gore, Big Bend, the Lake Station. So a lot of your commercial roadways. So as we looked at this, the C1 overlay was very confusing. Many people don't even would know to look at it. And even sometimes as we were reviewing things that were coming in under play as a rezoning would come in, we wouldn't realize, oh shoot, we forgot to look at this weird little section in the back for this C1 overlay and then try to figure out which streets it applied to. So the idea is to delineate the C1 overlay, to integrate that into the C district, and to allow on those particular streets the 3 stories and the 45 feet and integrate that into the code itself, making it easier for a developer as well as staff to be able to understand where those heights could be allowed. So we're not adding any more locations, we're simply looking at what is already in the code and moving it to a more logical place in the code section. One option that you probably saw in your packet that we did not discuss with the planning commission is the idea that we have quite a few, and as we kept looking at the various areas, we have quite a few areas in both C and D that do not back up to any single family residential. They back up to Highway 44, they back up to the railroad, they have commercial on all sides. So there was an idea that we could potentially increase in another key area on certain lots if they are not surrounded on any side by single family residential, that you could potentially have those go directly to 4 stories. Because that way, in those lots that face the highway, you could put a parking level underneath. You could add the height above and you could get some commercial on the front facing the commercial roadway. So there was that idea that that might help a little bit better with design. So we did bring that up. We apologize for not bringing that up with the planning commission, but as we kept, mulling over the ideas and thinking it through, it seemed logical that a couple of those areas could go to that maximum height of 4. So we had that as a potential change to what we had previously inserted. I'm not going to read through all of this, but this is currently what we have to look at to figure out the front setback in the C commercial district. Really difficult to look at. What we are recommending is to simplify it down to no minimum front yard is required, because you do want your commercial to be right up against the walkability of the district. But we want to make sure that the buildings and additions stay out of the site distance triangle for traffic. And if the lot is partially, we have a couple lots that have residential in the back half and commercial on the front half. If they do that, they do have to follow the front yard regulations for that lot frontage. And just to show you the reason why we do this, the first drawing that's right here, those are the setbacks that would have been imposed if we use our old code. And then these are the setbacks that would be imposed with the new code. So allowing commercial properties to actually, encompass a commercial property versus making them follow these crazy codes where you have to take the average of all the other buildings on the block and try to average that out, which makes sense in a residential neighborhood to continue to have those sort of undulating, doesn't look like a suburb where everything's built on exactly the same. But in the commercial, it doesn't make as much sense. Same thing with the D, lots and lots of language just to figure out the front yard setback. So we are again recommending no minimum front yard, looking at the site distance triangle, looking that if it is in a residential, they follow the residential lot frontages around on that property. And then also if the front yard is provided, it shouldn't exceed more than 10 feet. Except if they're going to have some sort of integrated covered patio. So we started to bring a little bit of the architecture into it to try to encourage, just like we encourage front porches within the community, we want to encourage the ability of outdoor dining, covered patios, and other things that I think have really increased in the last year. We've seen a lot of it. So again, here's some of these crazy setbacks that buildings would not be able to be built, and this would allow you to continue to follow that what you would want logically as a commercial frontage. Side yard setbacks, they're about as bad, if not worse, than front yard setbacks in terms of what you can and cannot do. So same thing with D, a lot of language just to get a side yard setback out of it. So in C and D commercial, usually you have no minimum side yard required unless you're abutting a single family residential dwelling. If you are doing that, we are recommending that you have at least 10 feet from that side property line. And then if they do provide a side yard in a district where they're not adjacent to residential, it has to be at least 5 feet wide. If you only provide 1 or 2 feet, you can't maintain it back there, and we have issues all the time with commercial properties not necessarily being able to maintain the sides of their properties. So we would recommend this in both the C and D district. So again, pretty similar. This is the idea that you would provide at least a minimum side yard if you're adjacent to residential, and then if there would be no side yard required if you weren't adjacent to residential. Rear yard setbacks. The C commercial district does have quite a bit of residential backing up to it. So for example, on the north side of Big Bend. So we always want to think about that rear yard setback. What that means for that rear yard. In the code, it requires some buffering, landscaping, fences, but most often you put the parking in the back, so it's up against the residential in that way. Trying to provide enough space for that buffer and still be able to get parking back there can be pretty difficult with some of these lots. So the recommendation is that single family and 2-family dwellings would have a rear yard setback, because in the C you can also have single family. And have a minimum required rear yard depth of 25 feet and a maximum of 35. And then every other use, so all the commercial uses, have to have at least 25 feet in their rear yard. So, sorry, that was what's in there now. And what we have in there proposed is if it's abutting the single family dwelling, you have to have at least the 25 feet that was already in there. Any new buildings that are 3 stories must have at least 40 feet from the rear property line. So again, giving a little bit of a separation. In most cases, if you were going to have a 3-story structure, some of them are going to have parking in the back on the lower level. And so also still needing that ability for them to get out of that parking. And again, if a rear yard is provided where it's not required, if it's commercial, up against commercial, still having that 5-foot depth for functional access and maintenance. So again, you can kind of see this here. Right now, many of them do not require. You can see the property, the building butts right up against the property that's residential behind, but requiring that there is at least that 40-yard setback, 40-foot rear yard setback if it's 3 stories, and a minimum to 25 feet if it's any new building that is 22.5 stories or less. Rear for the D commercial district, there was no rear yard setback required in the code. It had residential uses having a required setback, and then it talked about if the rear commercial building abutted a dwelling district and what their requirements would be. We again tried to clean this up a little bit to make sure that if you are over 3 stories or more, you have the 40-foot setback for new structures. If you're 2.5 stories or less, it would be 25. So similar to that, and again, the functional maintenance. We did go ahead and try to identify where do we have any that butt up against residential versus ones that butt up against railroad tracks. So you can kind of see there's just a few key places that butt up against a residential property. Most of the structures are already built all the way to the property line, but should at some time ever in the future a new structure be built, we would require that proper setback to keep it from butting up right against a residential property. The zoning area requirements, we are not proposing to make any change in the C district. Right now, it requires that you have 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit for 2-family, because they're allowed to have what's in the A4 district. Single-family dwelling units are required to have 5,000 square feet in lot area, and then we would still keep the minimum average lot width, but we're not proposing any changes for the area requirements. In the D, we were looking at there's a minimum of 1,500 square feet lot area per dwelling unit required for multiple family dwellings. And what that does is it limits how many units you can put on a piece of property. So even if you can meet all the parking and all the other things, it means that you can have essentially no units. And when you look at it, it actually prices out the ability to do a development. It puts your cost overall, when you add in the construction, to put rental units at 2,200 a month to 2,500 a month when you look at the market realities. Danny had a really nice little set of regulations that he provided to the planning commission. So if you want to see that, it's in the planning commission packets too. The existing code was already updated very recently, requiring that multiple family dwellings have 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. The idea of that is that when you are in a multi-family situation, you have the idea that you might have a number of visitors or guests, you're in a more dense area, you don't have the same thing as having a little bit of on-street parking in a really long driveway. So the 1.5 works out to provide additional guest parking, provides an average between someone who might only have one car for their unit versus 2 cars for their unit. It also helps to keep the idea that you might also have people who are not having units that are walking, and so gives that opportunity. So no changes to the parking. Front and side entry attached garages. So when we first started looking at this, we hadn't even thought about working on this code section. The very first hearing that we advertised did not include this code section. And then as we started thinking it through and talking it through, we realized we really need to think about this and the impact of what that garage door is going to look like in our workable community and our walkable areas. So we re-advertised again when we went to our second hearing and added this part in, because there are already a series of regulations to not have garage doors on the front entry garage on single family homes be so large and massive that there is no house, the house is kind of behind it. We had to think about that very importantly for what would happen with multiple family buildings. So we proposed some amendments that would say that front entry attached garages are not allowed on multiple family dwellings, on commercial uses, 2-family dwellings, and attached single family dwellings. So keeping that you're either accessing it from the rear, from the side, but not because a lot of them are going to be narrower due to the way that they're constructed. And looking at the side entry garage width on the 2-family dwellings, multiple family commercial uses, to not exceed, so not become this enormous where the entire elevation becomes a garage door. And then looking at multiple family dwellings and commercial uses with the side entry and rear entry garages have to have a minimum 40% of the first story front elevation with pedestrian entries and windows. So adding a little bit of the architecture in, which is already in our front entry garage regulations for single family. And you can see some of these different configurations of what some of the concerns were going to be of the entire thing is just a big garage door on the lower level. Going then to open space. Our code already requires a set of open space when you have multiple buildings and the separation between those buildings. What we wanted to do is continue to keep that same section and encourage the idea that if you were going to have an architectural configuration of a multiple family building, trying to provide some open space that is required that would provide that separation. Right now, you can see the example that we don't like, which is that essentially the space between it is just an alley of sorts that just provides the ability to just barely get into the garages. In addition, we are not recommending any changes to the performance standards, which we recently updated, the tree and landscape ordinance, which does need its own updating, but can still address the things that we needed to address, or stormwater control. Those will all cover and address the footprint, how they need to address stormwater on adjacent properties, how they need to protect trees or provide additional landscaping, and then all the performance standards for noise, odor, lighting, all of that's already in the C&D commercial districts. I went through that very quickly. We are completely open to the option of keeping this hearing open. We know that it's a lot of information, and you have a red line copy in your packets. You also have another blue line that we added if you wanted to go a little bit higher for properties that are adjacent to railroad or adjacent to highway. And I know that there's one comment that was sent in. If you want me to just go ahead and, oh, I guess I can ask for questions first. We do have one comment that's been sent in to be read.
I had a question about the front-facing garage on the multiple family housing. So you've eliminated the possibility of that?
We have, because if you think about it, let's just say, for example, what if Straub's decided to sell to someone and they want Straub's in the front, lower level, and they want to build multiple family over top of them. You don't want a garage off of Lockwood. You don't want garage doors off of Lockwood. So you don't want someone to be, all of our walkable sidewalks to have in and out cars. You want them to go around to the side of the rear and come into that garage and continue to encourage the walkability.
That makes sense.
Other questions? Comments?
So Mara, at one point, and I'm sure I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it because somebody is going to read it and think of it this way. You talk about Big Bend from Gray to Newport, which people are going to say, oh Lord, there's a huge residential area in there. None of the residential area is covered because by definition, they are written out of this.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And we could go back in and.
I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to get on the record that is, yeah.
On the record, it is only for commercial properties that are located along that stretch, and anything that's residential in between is not included.
Thank you. So may I ask one other question? Sorry, and then I'll cede the floor here. And, you talked about the rationale for this in some ways is just to make things more predictable and easier. So you're not going to the planned commercial all the time. That does not mean though, that anything that's proposed is somehow easier to make happen in terms of our regular codes, our review process, the ARB. All those things are still fully in place.
Correct. They are all fully in place.
Yeah.
So it would still need to have a site plan review, still need to provide a stormwater plan, tree and landscape, tree preservation, it would go to our review board. All of those things would be required.
Thank you.
Yes.
I ask if we do want to look at that additional height being added in those areas, what would that involve as a council?
So it would simply be that, like, if you close the hearing this evening, and Neil will be able to help me think this through a little bit more, but if you close the hearing this evening, you would want to ask to include those amendments. Or if you decide to keep the hearing open and you still have additional questions, which again, staff is perfectly fine with, we could start to integrate those into your next version that we would provide to you so that you would have a clean version that included everything. And I'm more than happy, Danny and I went through a couple different iterations. So there was the iteration that I put in the packet. He actually had another iteration that he thought might be a little bit tighter, which instead of saying 4 stories not showing a common boundary to the single family dwelling, he actually just had things like building spacing south of Orchard and the east side of Big Bend between the police station and Gray, maybe erected to a height. So he even like simplified it even more than just a few streets, which we have a map that would show what properties those include. So for example, right now in Old Orchard on Big Bend, there are a number of multi-family developments all along the railroad tracks in 44, just north. If you continue down and you go to the Subaru site, the gas station, all of those properties that are all along through there, most of them in the comprehensive plan are identified as just being commercial. So you couldn't put multifamily on the upper stories of those or build something with multifamily on upper stories. But on that side, because it's not just residential, you could pretty logically put some so that people aren't living right on railroad tracks. You could put your parking garage level in the back, put a couple stories above, and then put the commercial along the line there. So we could provide that at the next meeting if you want to see more detail and maybe look a little bit more at Danny and I had a couple different options.
Sarah, what's your thought on
I mean, I'm interested in if that, because it seems like that would make that a more reasonable thing to do if we elevated that restriction. So if we, if we made it so that they were able to build taller, there would be more interest maybe in actually doing that. I don't know. And developing in, multifamily in those places, because it just seems like a need.
It seems like it would improve functionality of the building. You have more options, more flexibility in how to program the building if we added that. And so I would be for looking at that, whether we close the public hearing or not tonight. Is that
Anybody else? I agree with you. And, a really good example of that is the Webster University dorms that are at least 4 stories and they are up against that highway. So that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is good. Anybody else? All right, then let's hear the comment and we'll see if there's anybody else in the public that wants to speak.
Awesome. Take it away. So this letter was received on July 5th with a correction on July 6th from Dava. To our mayor, city council, and city staff, I plead ignorance when it comes to fully understanding the fine details of this proposal. All I can provide is one layperson's perspective from 35,000 feet. Number 1, the last 6 words of the city mission statement are in a traditional yet progressive community. Traditional and progressive can often not heads and be polar opposites of one another. Both are important and play a vital role, but in this case, to me, the edge goes to progressive and to progress. Number 2, I believe communities move forward at the speed of trust. No trust, no progress. So I trust the planning commission, city council, and city staff on this and other major issues. Number 3, I believe that elected representatives owe the people not only their industry, but also their judgment, and they betray the people if they sacrifice their judgment for the people's opinions. I will trust and support the planning commission's and city council's judgment. Number 4, to city council in particular, diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just empty promises, but are real values and goals to work toward for the good of the community. Slowly but surely, council is taking smart, deliberate and positive actions to speak up and stand up for these values and positively move the needle. Number 5, as such, these zoning code amendments are the next tangible way to foster and nurture a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community and housing stock. As such, I trust and support the planning commission, city staff, and city council to honor tradition, to give progressive and important nudge in this case. Peace, Dave. So that's our one comment. There might be someone else.
Are there any other?
Yes.
Have any other comments?
I do not see any hands up.
I have a question before we decide whether we're going to close the public hearing or not. Are there possible developments out there that will depend on this particular change?
Staff has had conversations with at least 5 different developers for at least 3 different sites that have been very interested and watching to see what was happening in regards to this. They have the option to go to PC plan commercial, but the difficulty of that and thinking that through has held them off, has held a number of them off.
So we have interest. And so as we talk about whether or not we want to, we have 2 decisions to make. One is, are we going to do the 4 stories? And the second one is, are we going to keep the public hearing open or not? Let's deal with the 4 stories first. How does council feel about the 4 stories?
David, she's
I'm
looking
hearing
at you.
Sarah, yes, Pam, yes.
yes?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
Yes, yes, I'm a yes too. So, okay, we're ready for the 4 stories. All right, next decision. Does council want to keep this open or to close the hearing and move on?
Keep it open. Keep it open.
Especially that change.
Yeah, just, I'd like to see the language as part of our packet and
Okay, then we're hearing, keep it open, get the change done, and we will deal with this at our next first council meeting in August. And
we'll provide both a map and the language.
the language. Okay, sounds good.
Could we get a motion?
Yes, we need a motion to keep, Sarah, here we go, to keep this public hearing open.
Okay, Mayor, I move that we keep this public hearing open for another meeting
Till August 3rd.
till August 3rd.
Second.
All right. Take the vote.
Sure. Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to remarks of visitors, and I believe this is where we have a number of items to read. How many do we have?
Over 20. And we'll go ahead and start. And our first remarks with visitor comments is from Karen Sirocco. I wanted to take this opportunity to share what the majority of residents of Webster Groves feel about this proposed project down in Old Webster. Mainly, it stinks. Many residents on the Community Connect pages of Facebook are very upset with it. I'd like to consider this. Webster has a unique aspect going for it. It's the small footprint and cozy home feel that we all moved here for. We didn't move to Kirkwood because we don't want all that development and lose the charm that Webster has to offer. We don't want to turn into Maplewood. We don't want to turn into Brentwood or Richmond Heights or any of that. We want Webster to stay Webster. We didn't buy into Webster to then have it turn into Kirkwood with 7-story apartment buildings, loads of traffic, no place to park, and become an overcrowded, highly dense scene. No, please. I realize you've been spewing that we need to become more diverse. What are you actually saying? You cannot turn Ladue into Clayton. They'd never go for it, but that is what is happening here. And no, we don't need to change with the times. Honestly, it's not more that what we need, it's less than what we need. I can guarantee you will not bring in a more diverse population, which I believe you're saying ethnics, right? The L is a prime example of more BS spouted about diversity and affordable housing in Webster. Well, while walking my dog, I ran into a woman who was living there in a 1-bedroom apartment. $1,800 a month. $1,800 a month? I'm a single mother of 2 and I could never afford that. And with 2 kids, male and female, I'd have to have a 3-bedroom and I can't imagine what that could cost me. Think that through. Then with all those proposed apartments and many people and many cars, what will that do to get around Old Webster? How will I park to go to Muggs or Alvin Oak or Perennial or Clover and Bee or my chiropractor or my bank? Traffic will be like Kirkwood, which is why I never go there because there's no parking and too much traffic in the old section. Environmentally, we need less. Global warming and climate change is real. What we do need is less buildings and paved roads that reflect heat on themselves, plus the cars occupying them, creating more heat. We need to be an example of how to reverse the urban heat index by less building, less roads, and planting more shade trees to lower the temperatures. What you're pushing for does nothing but exacerbate the problem. And what's it really all for? Money? Why? What are you not getting? What do you need, really? Okay, so let's consider an alternative. What if more housing was offered in places that could be developed that need more affordable options? The stretch along Watson could be some. Rothman Furniture, Shrewsbury, still your 63119, is available and could be a 2, maybe 3-story residential with retail to offer all these people on that end of the city more opportunities closer to them. Ensure that many trees are planted to provide shade on all parking and streets and near buildings. Then you could take some of the old buildings in Old Webster and in the same footprint, do something similar to upgrade. We don't really need more retail here. And we have several lovely restaurants that more than provide options for us all in Webster and beyond. Basically, we don't want our cozy, homely, lovely city to be turned into a large multi-story eyesore with no purpose but to provide you with more money. Be smart, be ecological, be different, don't follow the lemmings, do the right thing, which is no on the SG development. And I speak for many who urge me to write this to you. I look forward to hearing from you and please advise what other steps we can take to stop this. Yeah. Next remarks are from Dave Buck. I thank you upfront for the opportunity to use my remarks tonight to publicize an upcoming community event. 7 years ago, Webster Groves High School football Hall of Famer and current North Webster resident, Kelvin Cunningham, and his wife Amy founded a new charitable organization called Webster Groves Family and Friends as a way to give back to the high school and its students. Its sole focus is to raise donations toward 10 to 15 college scholarships every year to need-assisted students who have distinguished themselves in community service. This coming Saturday morning, July 10th at 7:30, Webster Groves Family and Friends is hosting its first ever steeplechase walk. It begins and ends in the parking lot of Old Community Baptist Church at 238 West Kirkham Avenue. It's a 2.3-mile family-friendly leisurely walk through our North Webster neighborhood with a few inclines and declines, but lots of flat sidewalks. Importantly, the route connects and celebrates 7 historic Webster churches: Old Community Baptist Church, Blackwell Chapel AME Zion Church, Unity United Methodist Church, Gospel Temple Church of God in Christ, Nazarene Baptist Church, Park St. Louis Chapel, First Baptist Church in Webster Groves. Webster Groves is a walkable community, but with few organized walking events. No signups are required. The entire community is invited. Donations are appreciated and may be made at a specific link here. Thank you for supporting this wonderful organization and its important cause. Peace Day. Now, the next remarks of visitors is from Dan Brzezini. Why is the city council only educating one way for changing A4 zoning without using Orwellian double planning? How is this different than advocacy and not in violation of the Hatch Act? Why won't the city council let its fellow council members educate from their perspective on A4 zoning? Wasn't Mayor Jerry Welsh and Councilmember David Franklin also duly elected to represent the residents of Webster Groves? Is an A4 zoning now up to a vote by the entire Webster Groves community and not a 5-2 city council decision? When did doublespeak turn advocacy into one-sided education? Why did the city council approve the planning commission's refusal to listen to public comments at the public planning commission meeting on the 12th of July? Isn't a public meeting supposed to take public comments? Or is it the Orwellian suppression of the public voice by the city council and planning commission in the interest of the public good for Webster Groves residents? There are too many comments. Why not hold additional public meetings? Don't you want public input at all public meetings on public projects like the SG Collaborative Douglas Hill Old Webster redevelopment project? With a $5.3 million deficit in this year's budget, why isn't the city council listening to the professional recommendations of its city manager, financial team, and the mayor who has taught and written books on economics? I guess ignorance is strength, yet another unfortunate 1984 Orwellian metaphor. The next remarks are from Bud Wilmer. I'm writing in support of the Plan Commission's proposal of text amendments and their subsequent approval by the council in ordinance 9145 to provide opportunity for more two-family dwellings. I applaud you for your commitment to those changes. I see no way that these changes would in any manner alter the character of our city. Many don't know that Webster has had two-family dwellings for decades in A4 districts. Furthermore, only a limited number of lots in A4 districts are large enough to allow for two-family dwellings. In doing so, the changes also provide an option for builders that currently would want to tear down an affordable house and replace it with a large single-family structure to instead build a two-family dwelling. I live in an A4 district in Webster, and as a senior citizen, I love seeing young families walking in the neighborhood, talking and laughing with their kids and chatting with their neighbors. It reminds me of my first home and raising a family in a small community in California decades ago. The change that you approved have made possible the opportunity for young families to live in our wonderful community while also providing an opportunity for more seniors who want to downsize and stay in Webster where they would love to live in retirement. So even if only a few new two-family homes become available because of the changes you have made, that would be a good thing for those families and seniors and thereafter for generations. It will also be a good thing for our community of Webster Groves. Thank you for your time and best wishes to all. The next remarks are from Kristen Radigan. I am extremely upset about the COVID deniers and vaccine conspiracy theorists that were allowed to march on the Webster Groves Parade. My grandfather died from COVID, and this was so hurtful and disrespectful to me and my family. The misinformation about the vaccine they were allowed to spread can cause actual harm to people and possibly even lead to someone dying. As a Webster resident and someone who lives directly on the parade route, I am outraged. Not to mention these people were unvaccinated not masked, are allowed to march close to children, including my 4-year-old and 10-month-old, who aren't old enough to be vaccinated yet. My 4-year-old was masked, thankfully, because I follow recommendations based on actual science and evidence and recommendations for public health and safety. Having to explain this to my kids as well as our out-of-town guests was infuriating. This is extremely troubling and dangerous. Shame on Webster Groves for allowing this in our community parade. I feel ashamed and embarrassed as a member of this community. The next remark is from Carrie Herrick. I'm a Webster Groves resident writing to express my dismay in the city allowing a COVID anti-vaccination, anti-mask group to participate in the Community Days Parade on July 3rd, 2021. Freedom of speech need not be construed as requiring the city to provide a platform for dangerous disinformation that is contrary to the public health messaging of St. Louis County, the state, and the CDC. The next remarks from George Ann Bonsalé. Dear Mayor and Council, I am writing to you to express my outrage that anti-vaccination conspiracy theory groups were allowed to walk in the parade this year. We have lived in Webster Grove since 2012 and loved every minute of Webster 4th of July activities. While political groups marching in the parade aren't my favorite, they are understandable. However, conspiracy theorists spreading lies and misinformation, marching in the middle of a pandemic should never have a place in the parade, ever. Did you ever stop to think how triggering that must have been for families who have lost loved ones to COVID? To those who have been on the front lines treating COVID patients, how utterly insensitive and irresponsible. And if your excuse is that they applied under a different name, well, shame on you for not actually checking the backgrounds of the entrance in your parade. So embarrassing for Webster Groves. My hope is you change your policies for next year so something like this doesn't happen again. I look forward to hearing what your plan will be. The next remarks are from Eileen Steininger. I am sure you have received Barbara Stovall's email by now, and likely several copies. I would like to echo her sentiments. Freedom of speech is one thing. Spreading false information during a pandemic is a totally different and unacceptable thing. This parade was marketed to be a local hometown parade. Those participants who push for a COVID as a conspiracy certainly do not represent the majority of Webster Groves, nor anyone capable of reading and interpreting solid scientific information. I expect much better of you. The next remark is from Joe Grasso. Hello, this is Joe Grasso. I'm a Webster Groves resident on South Police Station Road. I've been attending the parade for most of my life. I want to compliment the council and the city on pulling off a fantastic 4th of July. The relocation of the fair to Eden was amazing, and the parade was also amazing. The reason for my comments today are concerning the super spreader event of the non-vaccinated human vectors that were arguing and spraying their Delta variant coronavirus all over the young children on the side of the parade. I feel the parade should not have politicians or groups spouting their religious or social agendas at all. The parade should be families and neighborhoods and local Webster businesses with a fun and upbeat message. And the city should review and police that message before allowing a group to attend that more. Creepy groups like the ones that swindled their way into the parade to spew their dangerous anti-vaxxer agenda have no place in our parade. I urge the council to limit participation in the future. Thank you very much. Once again, overall, a great job. Congrats. The next remarks are from Allison Foots. I was disgusted on Saturday, July 3rd, to see that COVID denied anti-vaccination entrant was included in the Webster Groves Days Parade. It is horrifying to me that after all the losses suffered by this community and elsewhere this past year and a half, including 2 beloved Ambrose teachers, that a group with this abhorrent message was allowed to march down our streets. This was a painful experience for myself and many others in the community. I respectfully request that going forward, measures be put in place to screen parade entrance and not allow entrance. The messages are clear, meant to troll our community. The next remark is from Kim Kaczewski. First, thank you for the role in creating a 4th of July celebration that's very special in our community. However, as a resident of Webster Groves for about 20 years, and as someone who lived on the parade route for 17, I have to say I agree with the trending remarks of disappointment in the parade of late. I understand the position of acceptance in accordance with the First Amendment, but I think the anti-vaccine group was something a bit different. I don't think spreading dangerous and misinformation has to be protected. Looking forward, I hope City Council members find ways to promote even more positive and community supportive entries that can counteract all the politics that have taken over the time of parade. Thank you all of your time for all that you do for Webster Groves. Next remarks is from Lindsay Rugg. Thank you for the wonderful weekend filled with many things I love about the 4th of July. The parade for the most part was great. I do have to say that I am disappointed that the group representing themselves as clean gut advocates were found to be anti-vaxxers and were allowed to march in the parade. That is not what I want representing Webster Groves. Please be careful about what is allowed in the parade in the future. Their message is harmful and uneducated and should not be promoted in this community. This was a judgment call that should have been made and they should have been removed from the parade. Thank you for your time and consideration and all the work that went into this event. I truly love Webster Groves and I'm proud to live here. Please make considerations in the future for our community. Next remark is from Beau Rocher. Parades are like statues. They are forms of celebration and veneration. They are what we hold up as examples for the community. Do better, please. The next remark is from Laura Swinchler. I was appalled and frankly fearful of people's health as I watched the anti-vaccination group march in Saturday's parade. Here was a group of proudly unvaccinated people unmasked and in violation of the city's guidelines published in the Webster Times, marching and yelling past thousands of children and adults in a state with the highest rate of new COVID cases. When I hopped on the social media and learned the city was given warning before close of business on Friday, July 2nd, that this group had misrepresented themselves to enter the parade, and that these warnings were accompanied by screenshots including instructions for marchers and the organizers' contact information, I almost couldn't believe it. The city messaged back to the person who shared these screenshots and warned of the group's misrepresentation, acknowledging they had received the information and declaring through its official Twitter account that ours is a free speech parade. This is unacceptable. This isn't about free speech. It's about putting the public's health at risk, because why? With the information the city was given, the group could have been prevented from participating. Our community deserves to know how and when the decision was made to allow this group to expose so many onlookers to a potential health threat, so we can make sure this never happens again. Jen, take it on.
All right. Our next remarks are from Melissa Harland. I'm sorry. Mayor and council members, as proud residents of Webster Grove since 2014, the Community Days Parade has been a highlight for our family each year. We were sad to be away due to a family commitment this year, and we're horrified to learn of the anti-vaccination group spreading misinformation in our community. I understand and expect to see organizations and politicians that I do not support or agree with, but when we are in the midst of a pandemic that has taken the lives of over 4 million human beings, over 600,000 Americans, almost 10,000 Missourians, and over 2,800 St. Louisans, city and county, I do not expect to see organizations that will cause even more deaths by spreading falsehoods. It is my understanding that this group is registered as Keys to a Healthy Gut, but we're handing out leaflets from Missouri Stands Up, a group that promotes no masks, no vaccines, and no lockdowns. I believe several steps should be taken to prevent such occurrences in the future. 1, ban Keys to a Healthy Gut and the individual who completed the registration form from any future participation. 2, require entries to include a link to their website and verify that it is legitimate business or organization, not a web page with links to conspiracy theories. 3, require entries to list any affiliate organizations that may be providing funding, messaging, etc. 4, require entrants to provide design, sketch, messaging, and any information that will be distributed during the parade for approval in advance of the parade. 5, on the day of the parade, check the design, messaging, and leaflets match what was approved. Anything not matching should be disqualified. Number 6, consider limiting entrance to specified geographic region in order to keep it local. Example, Webster, Webster School District, and communities, school districts sharing a boundary with Webster. Shrewsbury, Rock Hill, Glendale, Kirkwood, Maplewood, Brentwood, Crestwood, Marlboro. Thank you for considering making changes to the Community Days Parade in order to ensure it does not cause harm. Next, we have comments from Bob Bickford. Dear Mayor and Council, no doubt you've been inundated by emails, calls, and texts from citizens and others expressing their displeasure, concern, and even outrage over the parade participants who expressed their opinions about COVID-19. I was not able to attend this year's parade, but spoke with many who were, and I have watched the aftermath of the commentary on social media. I see several issues at play here. First, a potential misrepresentation of the parade entrant, keys to a healthygut.com, which also included individuals who are from an anti-COVID group. In recent prior years, this individual was allowed into the parade and prominently displayed a message on his billboard, which was not about gut health, holistic medicine, or anything similar, but an anti-Trump message. The community at large either applauded or ignored or scratched their heads over this puzzling entry. Some may have gone to the URL listed on the orange billboard. If I recall correctly, there was no measurable social outcry, no demands for the parade to not include someone like this, no offense that this individual misrepresented himself or that his message was inconsistent with his entry application. Second, COVID-19 has wreaked havoc in the US and around the world. It has created horrific loss of life. Many in our community feel that sting and pain. Others among us have lost jobs, business, homes, and savings. The economic impact has been significant. Not many are denying the reality and pain of COVID-19. The opinion of those who marched in the parade was certainly out of step, out of touch, and culturally and personally insensitive to fellow citizens. Third, passions are running high over vaccinations and the proper approach to remediate the COVID-19 virus. Even now, we are facing an increase in the Delta variant in our own community and state. We must acknowledge that the messaging and leadership of officials has been inconsistent, not just from the former president, but from the World Health Organization, Dr. Fauci, the CDC, and the media. Looking for certainty, we find ourselves wanting to cling to the phrase, science is settled. The professional scientists among us will tell us that it is improper to speak of science in that way. Science is never settled. It is always evolving, changing, adapting, and this all due to new data and studies that make their way into the public sphere. We've witnessed this over the 1.5+ years in this pandemic. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, what should be done now? Is this a matter of free speech? Was this a public hazard in the spreading of medical disinformation? Should a group displaying a message that is offensive and out of touch with the larger community be allowed to do so? Should the public outcry for elimination of religious, political, and organizational, i.e. pro-life, Planned Parenthood parade entries be heeded? How would one or some at the city level or those who receive that delegated responsibility even begin to appropriately adjudicate that duty? Would a denial to participate lead to potential court action, legal fees, injunctions, and appeals, and negative media attention? We are at a crossroads here. Perhaps it is best to listen, consider, and develop a plan over the next few months rather than in the heated passion of this moment. Some in our community are angry, others hurt.
Time.
Next is from Jason Nittig. All right. Hello. The city of Webster Groves has a history of exclusion based on race. A few historical examples of this are the library, schools, and pool excluding full service to Black community members. Most recently, the racist policy of requiring a resident sponsor for daily pool admission was removed. It is time for the city of Webster Groves to shift their past policies of exclusion from racial exclusion to good exclusion. At the 4th of July parade, a group about gut health displayed signs that are false regarding COVID-19 and medicine. Large banners included such things as COVID-19 is not real. The city's social media manager poorly defended allowing this group in the parade, saying they made it through the application process. I think this application process needs to be revised. Use the city's past experience with excluding to require that parade entries have a firm connection to Webster Groves or a resident sponsor. I hear the gut health organizer is from Fenton. Attached are 2 photos. One photo is a cake from a recent family gathering. 3 out of the 4 family members on the cake died from COVID-19, including my father, who I held while he died just days before my birthday and the week before Christmas. The other photo is from a past demonstration, and I think we all might agree is pretty distasteful. Based on the Twitter post by the city, I feel the current government would have no problem defending such messages in the community parade. Bottom line, the gut health group provided false information that is insulting, discriminatory, dangerous, and they openly harass parade watchers with comments. Considering your role as council member and community member, please take some time to reflect on what type of information you are willing to endorse. My suggestion is to take the time to come up with something exclusive to avoid having such harmful and detestable information in the parade. After all, the city has put much effort in the past to fight for exclusion for the wrong reason. Here's an opportunity to exclude for the right reason. This is from the Lang family, to whom it may concern. I took my 8-year-old daughter social distance to the end of the parade where we could keep her distance due to not being vaccinated. To see the anti-vaccination group come our way, Neither of us could fathom that something like this would be in the parade. We could not believe what we were seeing or hearing, which was also shouted to us. We refused the brochure they also offered. My daughter asked if this was a joke and was very upset, along with 99.9% of the rest of the crowd. I understand they may have slipped in under a pretend name, but enough is enough. This is your parade you curate for our community. You make the rules, so you have the power to fix it. Furthermore, you call it a community parade, but this is far beyond that. We understand freedom of speech, but this does not fall under the jurisdiction. It is time to make the parade family-oriented and fun. Please do us all a favor and take out the political or triggering groups and stop allowing this in. You gain nothing positive from the community for allowing it, as well as bad press. The 4th is a family day, not a day to debate pro-choice, pro-life, Trump, Biden, and worst of it all, the virus is a hoax group. They have the rest of the year to state their views, but a family community holiday parade is not that time. I should not have to have a talk with my children on the 4th of July about COVID deniers, pro-choice, pro-life, and whatever political party is marching. It does not matter what side you are on. Nobody wants to see it that day, sitting with their families. They take up space, make the parade too long, and create a toxic atmosphere that completely undoes a festive family holiday. We will not be back if changes aren't made, as there's no reason to watch it any longer if it remains the same. Next is from William Howells. The anti-vax Healthy Gut Stands Up entry in the 4th of July parade confirms that Webster Groves has become a target of right-wing extremists in the region. Continuing the trend of actions, including the 1350 graffiti on local churches, the swastika on the railroad sign, the NRA entry in the parade several years ago, and the sign guy who confronted State Rep Sarah Unzicker and removed political signs at polling places. The question is, what do we do about it? As a good progressive liberal, my inclination is to be the adult in the room and allow these groups to exercise their First Amendment rights. To do otherwise only feeds the persecution narrative common in these groups and may open the city to free speech lawsuits. However, being the adult doesn't mean doing nothing. We can't just sit back and let these groups have free reign in our city, especially in the case of Stands Up, who clearly crossed the line from free speech into spreading false and dangerous information in the middle of a deadly pandemic. As far as the parade next year, the city should do a more thorough vetting of the applications. If a group is judged to be extremist, much earlier notice should be given to the public to give time for groups to organize a counter entry. The model should be the Moms Demand Action versus NRA, where the moms simply overwhelmed the sad little NRA group. Another idea is a city-sponsored disclaimer banner, a large bright orange banner that immediately precedes the extremist entry and reads, "Warning, extremist group. The following entry does not reflect the values of the Webster Groves community." Then advise the group their entry will have the disclaimer. Maybe they'll drop out on their own. Okay, this one is from Marissa Thompson Boyle. The parade was something we did every year together. It was one of our family traditions. Maria especially loved, I'm sorry, this is not from Maria. This is from Marissa, her sister. The parade was something we did every year together. It was one of our family traditions. Maria especially loved the marching band as she was a flute player herself in high school for the Coast Guard. She'd be whistling and hollering during the parade. She absolutely loved it. Yesterday I came and I just couldn't go to the parade. The kids went and enjoyed it, but I couldn't go. It will forever be different. Experiencing the holidays for the first time without your most favorite person with you is awful. Numb and kind of zombie-like, to be honest. But to hear and see pictures of the group allowed to walk in the parade, claiming COVID as a fraud yesterday, brings up a whole other animal inside me. While I've mainly experienced deep sadness and some fleeting moments of anger, this group yesterday pissed me off. I'm here to tell whoever they are, if they even have it in their heart to listen and maybe change their minds, COVID is so expletive real, and it can and will rip away your most treasured person. She's sitting right here in this picture along the sidelines of the parade you just walked in and making false claims and ultimately putting more lives at risk. I can't stay in anger for long. It's not a luxury I can afford myself. I can only pray that those people make it through this pandemic and get to the other side whole and safe, because the giant hole where my sister once sat is real. Virus is real, and it's my real sister. Marissa Thompson Boyle, Webster resident from 2012 to 2018. She was 50 years young when she died from COVID. Picture taken at 4th of July Parade 2019. And this is from Marissa Barbo. This is from Jennifer Lohman. Yes, Jennifer Lohman. I am writing with 5 questions about the harmful anti-vaccine group that marched in the Webster Groves 4th of July parade. Ironically, as the council meets tonight, I will be hosting a screening of an anti-disinformation documentary that perhaps some folks need to watch in order to be completely clear on the life and death stakes of giving a platform to dangerous disinformation. Meanwhile, this is what residents of Webster Groves deserve to know. At what point was this group's agenda made clear to parade organizers? I have heard that this Healthy Gut group signed up for the parade a couple of years ago and ended up promoting a different conspiracy theory in the parade itself at that time. Is this true? If so, why were they allowed to enter the parade again? Once city officials became aware of this group's agenda, and it's clear from social media that that occurred at least days before the parade, was any attempt made to remove them from the parade, either for their deceptive application or because their message and presence caused real harm to public health and safety interests, thus placing it outside the protection of the First Amendment? Did the city at any point request clarification from an attorney about whether the First Amendment in fact required that this group be allowed to participate? This is a significant question because the First Amendment's protections are subject to limitations. In this case, the group appeared to submit a falsified parade application, but more to the point, both the speech itself, delivering a dangerous message that could literally lead to illness and death, and the method of delivering unmasked, unvaccinated people who could easily be COVID positive, shouting into the crowd and circulating in the crowd with disinformation flyers when the crowd was full of children too young to be vaccinated, suggests that the First Amendment would not protect this group's entry into the parade. Is the risk of a First Amendment lawsuit by a fringe group more compelling to the city of Webster Groves than the risk of the Delta variant spreading amongst Webster's children? What consequences will the city employees involved in permitting the participation of this dangerous group face? Their decision to give a platform to disinformation that could literally kill people should not be without consequences. How can this be prevented in the future? Is an all privately sponsored parade an option, since their First Amendment would not apply to a privately sponsored event? One doesn't see crazy conspiracy theory groups in the Macy's parade, for example, so it must be possible to screen parade participants. And we certainly don't need the Webster Groves 4th of July parade to become a target for extremist groups pushing a dangerous or polarizing agenda. We need it to be a fun, family-friendly, safe event. I'm eager to know the city's answers to these questions. This next one is from Sarah Hull. Dear Webster Groves City Council, on July 3rd, the city permitted a group to march in the Webster Groves Independence Day Parade and advocate in direct opposition to the St. Louis County pandemic response guidance set forth on July 1st. The group is not identifiable by the names of the groups listed in the parade lineups. The city of Webster Groves responded to a Twitter complaint that upon review, their application and participation in safety training allowed them to take part. We understand everyone will not support all groups, but as a free speech parade, if they've correctly moved through the application process, they can be included. As a major fan of the First Amendment, I applaud freedom of speech. However, as a firm believer in common sense saving lives, this response hiding behind the First Amendment is unacceptable. The city has neglected its responsibilities to govern reasonably and in the interest of the public's common good by permitting this group to participate in the parade. The city welcomed these people to disseminate misinformation with the intent to prevent people from being vaccinated against COVID-19 and to advocate against wearing face masks. These practices are a matter of life and death during this pandemic. Laying this on the altar of free speech on Twitter does not absolve the city of accountability. The city not only let these people dilute the county's COVID-19 messaging, but also lent a perception of community acceptance of it. This needs to be prevented in the future. Lives depend on it. I request that a policy be enacted to prohibit any group marching in the parade or participating in any other municipal event for the general public be permitted to provide leaflets, carry signs, verbalize, or otherwise communicate misinformation in opposition to current city, county, state, or federal public health advisories. That the parade coordinator or whichever city employee or representative be held responsible for the management of any event be accountable for the city enforcing adherence to said policy going forward. That a group registering for any city event be required to state the nature of their purpose, and upon learning of any group's participation in an event that is not aligned with their stated purpose, the city holds the right to eject and exclude the group from participation without liability for the costs the group would have incurred. Unclear applications should be clarified before granting participation. That the city stop using free speech as a shroud from responsibility to public health and safety. Would you permit a group in the city's parade to advocate that infant car seats might kill, as one leaflet's title indicated about COVID vaccines? How about letting brochures be handed out in front of the police station about speed limits being psychological torture, like wearing face masks was described? The city of Webster Groves providing a platform for this misinformation to proliferate may leave our citizens thinking there's a credible basis for disregarding county health advisory, resulting in further spread of COVID-19, more hospitalizations, and more deaths. Please take action now. Those of us who have lost loved ones and have family and friends at high risk from COVID-19 need to be able to depend on you, our elected representatives, to be situationally aware and to unite fighting harmful health information now more than ever. Okay, this is from Jill Anderson. Hello, I would like to add my voice to the chorus of Webster Groves residents appalled by the COVID conspiracy theory entry in the parade. Spreading false information that could lead to harm to our community should not be included in the parade. I know each year that there will be political groups with whom I do not agree in the parade, but this group was different. They came in seemingly to incite disorder. I watched someone who had lost a family member to COVID try to confront the group in the parade. I cannot fathom the feeling they must have had on a day they were trying to enjoy with their family and their community when that group rolled through with no warning. Seems to be the epitome of incitement, or at the very least, fighting words. If the parade organizers will not regulate the entries, they should at the very least communicate to the public what kind of messages will be displayed so that we can prepare. Even the Westboro Baptist Church publicizes their planned demonstrations, which gives the community the chance to prepare a response. As a city, the message should be clear. We want to protect our community by all doing our part, wearing masks, getting vaccinated, etc. I cannot imagine an AIDS is not real or condoms could kill you display being allowed in the parade. There has to be some kind of standard. This is from Stella Heine. Dear Webster Grove City Council, I'm going to make this short, although my feelings are greater than the time I have to write this. I moved to Webster and bought a home in November of 2020. I came here during COVID and felt that the community was doing its part to help the efforts containing the virus. I was thankful since I am a registered nurse and have seen some of the worst this disease can do. There was nothing worse for me to have tired through a 14-hour shift, stressed out to the max, and then to come home and see people not caring. I felt Webster Groves was doing well. I was sad to not be able to go to the parade last Saturday. I knew the route would be right down the street from my home. Instead, I was working a 14-hour shift as I had the day before. When I saw the pictures from the parade, what I saw was a disgrace to our community. In medicine, we say, do no harm. Everything we do, we are conscious of that. What was the point of having anti-vaccination people in the parade? Wasn't it supposed to be a parade of celebrating people and community and joy? What is it that Webster Groves stands for? So they passed the pre-check test. So you talk about free speech. If an anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, anti-Asian group passed the pre-check tests, would you let them have their free speech? If a group with a known hateful and one-sided view wanted to walk with signs and they passed the checks, you'd let them? It's a parade for the community that we want to keep safe. I keep this community safe by being a nurse. By allowing this group into the parade, you walked all over what I believe Webster Groves is proud of being, and it's all over the internet. In the future, I do not believe anyone should be allowed to solicit health-related propaganda, political agendas, religious agendas, or advertisements that are non-Webster Groves. These parades and events funded by Webster Groves should have small businesses from Webster Groves, musicians, colorful, peaceful, and joyous ideas. Please consider this hardworking nurse's point of view. I know I'm not alone. This is from Pam Niehaus. On July 3rd, a beautiful parade day was marred by marching anti-vaxxers, spewing lies at our children and families, and even walking through the crowd with brochures. But no masks, of course. This group applied to the parade organizers under a fake name, but was allowed to march even though city administration learned of their identity through social media before close of business on Friday, July 2nd. The city's response via Twitter was that the event was a free speech parade. This is nonsense. This is not a free speech or political issue. This is a public health issue. A community that has suffered innumerable losses due to COVID-19 should not have to deal with anti-vaxxers yelling that the disease is a hoax, all courtesy of the city administration. It was particularly sickening that young children and babies on the front line of the parade route, kids who are not eligible for the vaccine yet, were exposed to ugly banners and angry marchers. Missouri is among the top 3 states for low vaccination rates and increasing COVID cases, particularly the new Delta variant. In the last few days, state and national media has reported comments from the president and CEO of Missouri-based Cox Health in Springfield, who has urged anyone spreading misinformation about COVID to stop. The CEO wrote on Twitter, if you're making wildly disparaging comments about the vaccine and have no public health expertise, You may be responsible for someone's death. Shut up. Webster Groves City Administration should not be responsible for spreading misinformation. Already one of the anti-vaxxers has posted on social media about marching in the parade. Please consider reviewing policies for parade participation, especially as next year is a political year and may draw more fringe groups. Of course, we all have the constitutional right to free speech, but we don't all have the right to march in a city-sponsored parade. Thank you for your attention. Hang on. This last one is from Sue A. Jolly Van Sant. Dear City Council, Mayor Welch, and council members. I'm a 24-year resident of Northwest Webster Groves. One of the things I love most about Webster Groves is its annual 4th of July or Community Days parade the city hosts for the public. It's an uplifting experience to see community residents come together and celebrate our nation's birthday. As we emerge from the COVID pandemic, this year's parade was an especially uplifting one. In my opinion, it's the city's most visible and well-attended, attracting thousands of viewers event. As some of you may know from a letter I sent to the council on July 14th, 2019, I'm concerned that some of the practices surrounding the Community Days Parade may exclude people from having an equitable opportunity to view it. Listed below are 4 examples of relatively recent parade viewing practices or a lack thereof that reflect a culture of exclusivity. 1, the city allowed an organization on the Lockwood portion of the parade route to collect money from those wanting front row reserved seats placed within the public easement to view the parade in front of its building. In both 2019 and 2021, the city declined to provide designated seating for those with physical disabilities. Both years, the city declined to do so because it is legally under no obligation to set aside accessible seating for people with disabilities because we are not providing seating for anyone for the event. I believe the city should reconsider this this legalistic point of view and help those who need assistance obtaining access to viewing the parade. And I appreciate Councilman Franklin and various staff members' efforts to investigate and further pursue this matter. 3, by not enforcing Webster Groves Code 10.210, obstruction of streets and public ways, I question whether the city is perpetuating the practice by some to rope off vast swaths of the public easement along the parade route for their own private parade viewing gatherings, sometimes many days prior to the parade. By marking their viewing spaces early and wide, often with long ropes, and only a chair or 2 extending the entire length of a business or house, I suspect these individuals communicate to others that others are not welcome to their share any public viewing space along the city's easements. To contemplate this topic, when I received an email from the city on July 5th, 2021, informing me that it won't provide designated seating for those with disabilities, the content of this email did imply that it's okay for residents to reserve personal viewing space on the parade route because there's nothing prohibiting any person from putting out their chair to reserve spots. However, this guidance from the city did not specify how far in advance of the parade viewers can do this. In 2022 parade communications, can the city please answer the following questions? Whether or not code 10.210 applies to the public's current practice of reserving personal space on parade routes, public ways. Does code 10.210 prohibit using ropes, stakes, tents, and chairs? All of these were used along the parade route in 2021 to reserve personal parade viewing space along the parade routes, public ways. All right.
I guess we'll see if there's any hands up.
Yes.
Submit.
Yes.
Anyone else would like to make remarks to visitors? Please raise your hand. No.
Okay, great. Then we are at the end of remarks to visitors, and I think our city attorney has a comment he would like to make regarding these issues. Thank you, Neil.
In preparation of these remarks, I will tell you that I have read every single submission that's been provided by citizens regarding the parade itself. I will tell you that I have also listened, of course, carefully to everything that was said here tonight. The Webster Groves Community Days Parade is held annually on the 4th of July, as you all know. It celebrates both the birth of the nation and the unique qualities of Webster Groves. The parade is open to anyone who submits an application and attends safety training. It is a publicly funded parade, and as a consequence of being a publicly funded parade, it is subject to the limitations of the First Amendment. It's an irony, I guess, that based on something that celebrates the birth of this nation, that the First Amendment comes into question tonight. I don't mean to argue this, but I want to explain what my position is. 2 years ago, the city reviewed all of the policies regarding the parade itself. We wanted to ensure that we had reasonable limitations because we had run into some problems, particularly where we had someone who had represented that they had a float in the parade. They indicated that they were going to have a few people that were part of that float. I think they indicated maybe it was going to be 15, maybe it was going to be 20, and it turned out to be closer to 75. And it created a real problem for us in terms of the parade itself. So we sat down and we reviewed all of these things to make sure that we had reasonable limitations that were content neutral. And that phrase content neutral is an extremely important part of this conversation. It means simply that we were looking to limit, not based on the messages that people were providing, but we were looking to limit based upon those things that truly did affect public safety. So the number that went from 15 to 75 affected public safety because now we have a significantly longer parade. So all of those things were reviewed, all of those things were considered, and we made changes. Even with those changes, we had someone that took advantage. But even if we had known, I would submit to you that because the parade is open to anyone, that Webster Groves does not and may not exclude anyone on the basis of the identity of the group, or the principles for which they stand, or the content of the message they promote, except under very limited circumstances. We do those things because the First Amendment tells us that we must. The First Amendment says simply, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Because of the 14th Amendment, it applies directly to us as a state and as a part of the state of Missouri. The authority that we have in the state of Missouri is also limited. We may make no law abridging the freedom of speech. The parade is a government-sponsored event, and as a consequence, we may not discriminate against those who seek to participate or on the basis of the message that the participant seeks to express. To do so would be a violation of the First Amendment. Now, there are a few cases I want to talk to you about. And again, for those people who say that we're hiding behind the First Amendment, it applies to us. We're hiding behind nothing. But if we're going to hide behind something, I can't think of anything more honorable than the First Amendment. The First Amendment, as I said, states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. The case of Virginia versus Black, and these are all Supreme Court cases I'm going to be referring to, was a 2003 case. And it makes this statement: the hallmark of the protection of free speech is to allow free trade in ideas, even ideas that the overwhelming majority of people might find distasteful or discomforting. It goes on to say in that very same case, the First Amendment ordinarily denies the state a power to prohibit the dissemination of social, economic, and political doctrine which a vast majority of its citizens believes to be false and fraught with evil consequence. That seems to me to apply to what we've heard here with the statements of our citizens. They believe that the statements of this group was false and full of evil consequence. I agree. And the First Amendment says they have a right to march. There are a few other considerations I want you to think about. When we talk about the limitations of speech, we have certain types of speech which are unprotected, and we have certain types of speech which are protected. The unprotected speech is obscenity. We know what that is. We can take action. We can legislate to prevent obscenity. Child pornography, we can take action to legislate against. And fighting words and true threats are the other section that we can take action against. Now, when we talk about things like fighting words and true threats, there are a number of cases that define that for us. And we've heard references tonight to public safety and that sort of thing. Public safety is not a basis to move something into the unprotected category. What is unprotected is information that is being put out there. And I will give you a couple of cases on this. When we talk about fighting words, it is those personally abusive epithets which, when addressed to the ordinary citizen, are, as a matter of common knowledge, inherently likely to provoke violent reaction. When we talk about things that are pure threats, what we're talking about are those things that are designed to have an imminent reaction. And that is, again, relying on this case, Virginia versus Black. We talk about true threat again in this case, where it says the First Amendment may allow a state to ban a true threat, which are statements where the speaker means to communicate a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence to a particular individual or group of individuals. The imminency of a violent response is what puts language in the category of unprotected language. Everything else is protected language. Now, the Supreme Court has defined what we've heard here tonight as content-based restrictions. Content-based restrictions. I'm going to read to you from a case called Rosenberger versus Rector and Visitors, University of Virginia. It's a 1995 case, and it says this: discrimination against speech because of its message is presumed to be unconstitutional. When the government targets not the subject matter, but particular views taken by speakers on a subject, the violation of the First Amendment is all the more blatant. So not the subject matter, but the views of the speaker. Viewpoint discrimination is thus an egregious form of content discrimination. The government must abstain from regulating speech when the specific motivating ideology or the opinion or perspective of the speaker is the rationale for the restriction. That's what you've heard in the comments and the statements. And these are statements that I understand. I'm not endorsing, nor have you, as the city of Webster Groves, endorsed this position. You have created a public platform that is open to all. And even if it contains opinions that we find distasteful, we've still opened it to all, and we may not limit the content. And the Supreme Court tells us that. Even in situations when we're talking about this public good, even in situations where we would have someone who would march in the parade who would suggest that the use of violence against the United States, and that seems to me to be a particular time point, someone who would advocate for violence against the United States is not going to fall into the category of unprotected speech. It is still protected speech, unless that threat of violence is imminent. We may find these things false and fraught with legal consequence, but we still have no right to limit the content. The parade includes many different voices and perspectives on politics, local issues, and national concerns. These different points of view are woven into the purpose of such a parade and in fact reflect the diversity of this community. Freedom of expression applies to everyone, and if a particular point of view or statement is disagreeable, it's simply part of the cost we all pay to ensure that those points of view or statements that we find agreeable can be made. Ironically, one of the reasons we march, or that we allow anyone to march in the parade, is to ensure that even disagreeable expressions have the right to be heard. Webster Groves has no authority to limit this parade. And now I speak to Ms. Neil Bruntrager, 462 East Jackson, a person who wants to make a comment. The statements that were made by the people who marched in that parade who were anti-COVID are despicable. And have an absolute right to do it. I applaud the fact that we create a platform that gives people the right to be heard, even on those subjects that we get into.
Neil, can I ask a question,
Sure.
please? So I agree with you about the First Amendment portion of this, and I agree that the comments were despicable. One of the things that came up, though, repeatedly is not just words, but action, right? Approaching people in this group unmasked. We can presume they're unvaccinated because of their viewpoint, coming up to people in the crowd, approaching them, speaking with them, and being in a close proximity. Our application said you had to do 2 of 3 things: be outside, wear a mask, or keep social distance. So in a sense, then they did violate the rules of our parade. So what does that mean in this larger debate that the discussion that we're having here?
Again, we have rules that we can enforce if they are content neutral. We have rules that if they are reasonable, we can enforce. The problem that we have is at what point in the parade, we have a staging ground. Again, we talked about this 2 years ago. We have a staging ground where people are lined up. We have people who walk by to make sure that everybody seems to be in line, and the numbers are all set up, that sort of thing. You do a cursory view. What happens when they get into the parade itself? We don't have the manpower to marshal what's going on once they get out onto the parade. Now, again, in the future, could we address something like a mask? Could we do that sort of thing? The problem again becomes manpower. You know, again, masks are not mandated at this point by the county. They're not mandated certainly by the state of Missouri. They're not mandated by the federal government. Masks become a situation where we say to people, even when we come into this building, we would like you to wear a mask if you've not been vaccinated. People who have been vaccinated don't have to wear a mask. Okay, but we don't check. We can't check them. Because again, there's just simply no way to marshal. All right. So again, we do the best that we can do in terms of making sure that we're watching these things along the parade route. But at what point do they take off the masks? At what point do they approach? You know, again, can we keep everyone herded? Can we make those rules a little bit more firm? Perhaps. But again, I'm not hearing that in the complaints. I mean, I realize some people may have said that time and again. What people have said is the message. And we have to have a prescription to keep them out of future parades. That, by the way, is called prior restraint. All right. So again, if we set up a rule today that says next year, if you're going to have this message, you can't be in the parade, I guarantee you we're buying a First Amendment lawsuit that would be undefended. We will lose that lawsuit because we are limiting this on the basis of public messages. So it becomes problematic. I recognize what we're talking about, but it's just, it's a condition of the parade itself. But let me say one other thing that this made me think of this. We also have reference to Macy's and what happens in these other parades. Those are private parades. They can impose any limits they want to impose. There is one Supreme Court case that had to do with a parade that was run by an Irish group in Boston. And they prohibited gays from being part of the parade. And it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, it's a private group, you can do it. All right? Private groups have far greater accessibility and the limits they impose are much better. They aren't limited by the First Amendment. We are. So again, what you've talked about is a problem in terms of actual execution out of the parade ground itself. You just don't have enough people.
Neil, how far are we allowed to question the intent of the applicants before they stand by what they've written that they would be doing?
Sure. So the question is this. We can only go so far as we create rules and regulations that allow us to do that. But if the purpose of that rule or regulation is to discover who they are and then think, they aren't somebody I want.
What about just for the fact of just the sake of knowing and being prepared, or?
And if it's for the sake of knowing and you intend to do nothing with it, you can put it in there and say, we need to know who you are and what you stand for. But the moment that becomes, and now you're not going to march, now we've crossed over the line. If you want that information solely because we want to know who they are, you can do that.
And that they're being truthful.
Again, but what if they're not? What if somebody says to us, here you go, do you then exclude them from the parade? And I asked that question because the problem is the level of scrutiny that we apply. If we decide that we're going to eliminate someone from the parade, we now have to fall under the strict scrutiny that the Supreme Court would apply to this sort of decision. Does that make sense?
What if I think what it does though is it does question accountability and integrity and how much that person really is going to, what their intent is and how they're going to.
So if you wanted to put on
and at least we're calling them out for something.
If you want to put on the application for everybody, we want your name. If you have a website, we want to know what the website is. If you have an organization and you have, it's 501c3 or whatever it is, or it's just whatever it is, a group of people, we want to know who they are, and we want to know what your Facebook address is, and you can put that on as long as you're not using it to exclude. Because that would be a reasonable determination, a reasonable set of rules that is not eliminating speech. Now, might it have a chilling effect? Maybe. But again, and there are cases that have been brought that have said, you've asked so many questions, you've imposed so many requirements to get in the parade, it has a chilling effect. I would not be afraid of that lawsuit. would be afraid of it to say, now that we know who you are.
What about if it's to share the information of who's going to participate? Because I think that was something we heard a little bit too, is that people would have preferred to know ahead of time that this was something that was coming. I mean, do we have the right to share ahead of time, like these are the participants in the parade?
Sure, we have a right to put a list of who's in the parade, who's marching. Yeah, and if they put an indication of who they are and what they stand for, that would be there.
You know, it seems to me that if we wanted to hide behind anything, it would be just eliminating the parade in general. And the community has that option. If they don't want these conspiracy theorists or these bad views or what they consider bad views, they have the option to say, hey, Webster Groves, let's cancel the parade. But that seems to me, at least in my opinion, to be the complete opposite of what the purpose of the First Amendment would be. When you look at what our parade is typically comprised of, it's all of the wonderful things. And someone in their letter indicated that the Westboro Baptist Church gives their location in order that there's could be counter protests. The reason they give their location is that there is a counter protest, so it makes national news. And that's effectively what we've done here in the local community now is we've highlighted these conspiracy theorists rather than concentrating on the positives of what the parade does. I'm not saying that we shouldn't dispose of these views, but there's a better way of doing it, I believe, that one, not canceling the parade, or two, elevating what their position is.
I have been in parades where there have been people who have taken positions that people didn't agree. And the people on the parade route simply turned away.
That's what we
What greater statement is there than that? You've given them the opportunity to be heard, and you know what? I choose not to listen. So again, you're there, you're giving you the platform, but I don't accept what you do. You know, I agree with you, David. There's only one way to eliminate this, and that's eliminate the parade. Now you've taken a significant component of what is Webster Groves, and you've eliminated it. Why would we do it? Again, I think there are better ways to do it. I think it's sad we've given them an additional platform. All the responses that we've had, all the things that have been said, all of the accusations about the failure of the city, why did we let this happen? Again, it's the First Amendment. But the fact of the matter is, we've given them a platform to do this.
Can we though also, I understand that, but let's also acknowledge that this caused real hurt and emotional damage to people. And maybe we can't exclude them, but let's acknowledge that people who wrote to many of them lost people to COVID. And that is an open wound that they're still feeling. And so if, they need to share with us in the rawest way, then that's our job to listen to it.
And I don't for a moment mean to diminish what they're feeling in that regard. I agree with them. Again, and I feel for them.
Yeah.
I do. My daughter's a nurse. I have a full sense of what it means to have family exposed. And the truth of the matter is, again, this is in no way diminishing what their losses. We're simply talking about the limits under which we must live. I will tell you that one of the documents that I used, and if people want to read about the First Amendment and verify this for themselves, freedom of speech and press, exceptions to the First Amendment, which was done as part of the Congressional Research Project. It was done in 2014, so it's a recent article. It was done by Kathleen Ann Ruane, Ruane. It has a very nice summary and includes all the cases that I've cited tonight. So again, it's a good read to understand what the First Amendment does and what it doesn't.
Neil, I think I understood you to say that our application asked that if you've not been vaccinated, please wear a mask or social distance. Is that?
So originally, the application was put out before the county removed restrictions on COVID. And so it did have the three-part rule. You have to do two of the three things: be outside, be social distance, or be masked. But it also said we will abide by the county regulations as of July 3rd, the date of the parade. So the new regulations don't require this as of July 3rd.
Okay. Because my question was going to be if the participant was shown to have violated the agreements set forth for being in the parade, is that something that could be considered in the future if they were to apply again? But
so again, as a form of punishment, the problem is that punishment, again, in my opinion, probably is going to be a content-based response. Now, what we can do is, again, look at it again and make sure that we have more identifying information, perhaps, if there are organizations or groups that are out there. Now, it's not going to be it's not going to be 100% foolproof. There's going to be opportunities for people to try and fool us if they want to. You know, next year's going to be an election year. It's going to be the midterms, right? We're going to see lots of things that are going to come up. Do you eliminate everything that's political? Even then, the problem is, how do you decide what that is? You know, again, and who decides that? Do you delegate that authority to Scott, or do you give it to Steve Clark, or do you all decide? You know, again, frankly, I think it's a non-delegable thing. You would have to make those decisions yourself. But from my perspective, you can't. I mean, there's just no way to interpret all of these things and then to apply them in a manner that is going to be non-discriminatory.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that's going to be non-discriminatory, because I think it's very ironic that we are talking about an Independence Day parade. And wow, the ugliness, which I know too much about, that was exhibited is such a part of the Independence Day message that we can't pick and choose when we want to apply it.
You know, the Nazis were allowed to vote, they actually never did much, so the Supreme Court said they could, right? There have been any number of cases out there that deal with serious pain and serious hurt.
Right.
And obvious injuries. The Virginia versus Black case that I'm talking about is a case that dealt with burning a cross on someone's front yard. I mean, again, these are signs and symbols that are meant to hurt.
Right.
Again, these are all very, very sad things, but the history of our nation, particularly in the 20th century, there's been a flood of First Amendment cases. And there have been, well, I got to tell you, a 65-page report by Elaine Kagan, Supreme Court Justice now, times and imagine head spin, because the analysis is so in depth and they're so careful to balance everything. But the bottom line of it is these cases stand for the principles that I decided. Once you start down the path of contact restriction.
All right.
So thank you for your time and the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you very much, Neil. We appreciate this. And I think with Councilwoman Arnold's sentiment, we do offer our sympathy and our thoughtfulness to those who are suffering from what they observed.
Mayor, like that, just a couple comments if I may, and thank you. And thank you to you and to Councilwoman Arnold. And I know the rest of the council, I've heard your comments, and everybody's heart goes out to those that have lost family or friends due to COVID. And unfortunately, we'll still lose family or friends due to COVID. We are not out of a pandemic. And so, yeah, I wish there were some other way around this. And so there's not. And so I want to share my sympathies as well. But I also want to applaud staff. This was a hard event. The parade was hard. All of the events, the fireworks were hard, and hard because of what Scott said in terms of, county lifted restrictions. We didn't have a lot of time. And I don't know if people understand, or even if council understands the amount of work that went into that, because we didn't think we were having community days. We didn't think there was going to be permits available. We didn't think there was going to be a parade. Staff did a remarkable job. Planning departments, everybody, Parks and Rec, people rallied, police department, fire department, so that this event could be carried out. Was it perfect? Clearly not. However, it was darn good. And what an event. And so I really appreciate everything that staff did. Huge shout out to Eden and, the Lions Club, and to the community. Thank you to the community for attending. Thank you for the community for attending safely. And thank you for the community for taking time to express your viewpoints, even those viewpoints that were challenging to read, because there were some that were challenging. Thank you, because this is what civil discourse is all about. So thank you.
Thank you for that good statement. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, now we're going to go on with our agenda, and we're moving on. I don't know if anybody has any new business. My only reminder is that we have a lot of musical events coming up, so pay attention to our website and we'll put those on there. I'm sure they're there already. So we're going to start with unfinished business. Councilmember Smith I've picked on Sarah a lot. So Councilmember Smith, could you call for the third reading of 9153, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third reading of 9153. Excuse me, Bill number 9153 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9153, third reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Patterson Performing Arts to allow an educational facility, school for the arts use on an approximately 1.67 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 45 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions or issues? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Bill 9153 has passed. Councilwoman Bliss, would you call for resolution 2021-32?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the reading of resolution 2021-32 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
I think the city manager is going to read this resolution.
Maybe. Yes, thank you. He's leading me astray. So I am actually very proud to read this resolution. Resolution number 2021-32, declaring Juneteenth as an official city holiday and amending the City of Webster Grove's personnel policies.
All right. Any questions or issues? Let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Good. We now officially have Juneteenth as a city holiday. Thank you for bringing that forward.
I do think I could have read it better.
Can we vote on that?
Councilwoman Arnold, 9155, please. Where am I?
Oh, I'm on the old one. That's why I have
Yeah,
a
the old
problem
one.
here. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9155.
Second.
Bill 9155, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending certain provisions of Chapter 4, Article 15, TIF Commission of the Revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions or comments, something that you might want to add, ask?
If I can, so you all know, this is just bringing us into compliance with the changes which have occurred since we last added TIF.
Okay.
Is there any reason we would need to go ahead and do all three readings since we're under a time constraint? No.
I mean, either way. We plan to do just two tonight.
Okay.
In my talks with Mark.
All right, any other questions? Then let's do that second reading.
Bill 9155, second reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending certain provisions of Chapter 4, Article 15, TIF Commission of the Revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, and matters related thereto.
All right, Resolution 2021-33. Councilmember Franklin, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the reading of resolution number 2021-33 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Resolution 2021-33, a resolution convening the Tax Increment Financing Commission of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, and authorizing certain actions connected therewith.
Any questions?
Sorry.
After you, David.
I was just gonna ask, all this does is set up the TIF commission. It does not approve or delineate any tax incremental financing that either may or may not be submitted by the TIF commission to council for final approval. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And can we talk about why we're doing this before the Plan Commission has finished its work?
Because we're under a bit of a gun regarding the changes in the TIF laws that were enacted by or signed by the governor about a week ago. So moving this forward and getting this set up, the structure set up, because that's all this is doing, is necessary in order to make sure we meet the time deadlines.
And in the structure, we will have several appointments by the city council. At what point are we going to ask if there are some applications from residents for the TIF commission?
I believe at this point, we would ask for that because I think you should take those up at your first August meeting.
Okay, so we're going to have to figure out how to put a call out for members to who would ask to be on the TIF commission. And the council may begin to think about what sort of background we'd like to have, because we really want people on the TIF commission who understand what the responsibilities are.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe we can work with putting that out.
Absolutely.
Marie
I'd
and
be
Jenny.
happy to work with Neil and Mark Graham, and we could probably come up with a one-pager on what those roles, responsibilities are, what's expected of a TIF commission member, and share that with council for comment.
I think that would be really good and get that out fairly soon, because there are lots of members of our community, so many of who've had experience before on TIF commissions and can understand the financial information that'll be necessary to do a good job. But thank you. All right, can we, I guess, are there any other comments? Then we'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Our next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Does anybody care to remove anything? If not, Councilwoman Alexander, could you call for the approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second. All right, Sarah. Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, we have no appointments to boards and commissions this evening. We will do the library board for probably those library folks are still hanging on, don't you think? 3 hours later, they want to know if they've been appointed or not. I doubt it. Anyhow, we will do those, one more interview and do the appointments at our first meeting in August. And we have to tell folks that we have canceled the second meeting in July. So our next meeting will be on August
I know.
3rd. So take the time to enjoy life. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah.
Are we done?